Hey everyone, and welcome back to this unboxing overview demo of a brand new piece of audio gear. And this is the Zoom R20 multi-track recorder. So I just picked this up, and you should know I paid full price for it. The current retail price for it everywhere is $3.99 US dollars. I ordered this directly through Zoom, and it should have gotten here a lot more quickly than it did, but we had a major snowstorm here in Lake Tahoe, just setting some December records, and so the thing was stuck somehow on the West Coast for a while. Finally got here today by FedEx, and really happy to receive it. So the R20 is a multi-track recorder and mixer. It does a lot of different things, and we're going to talk about how exactly this might work in your workflow, whether you're doing something with modular gear, whether you're doing electroacoustic experimentation, maybe doing a lot with handheld, small pocket-sized devices like the Bastel, Castel line and so forth that might provide an opportunity to really use a mixer like this because it is so compact, and recorder that will allow you to do some things maybe that are pretty unique for both the price point, the size, and the particular set of features here that you're going to find. But before we get to the unboxing, one of the things I want to talk about is that we sometimes find that we have a lot of different mixers in our spaces for different purposes. I often say that mixers are like ladders, and it sounds kind of silly, but if you think about it, if you own a house, you might have 3, 4, even 5 different ladders. You might have a small step ladder to get things that are kind of just barely out of reach. You might have a bigger ladder, and then you have one maybe to go on the roof and so forth. So the same thing happens with mixers. So I have my big mixer here, which is my Allen & Heath QU16. And this mixer actually does some things that this does, notably, and obviously it's a full-fledged mixer, so you have control over all your channels. You have a lot more variety and options in terms of inputs, either XLR or quarter-inch cables, which you don't necessarily have in full-fledged here on the R20. And of course, you do have, right now, I'm recording with this microphone, using a flash drive. You do have the ability to do simple multi-track recording. Nothing like what you can do in the R20. So I have this big mixer, and this is the studio mixer that is used to mix all my sounds and gear here. I also use this for voiceovers. I sometimes use it for recording acoustic instruments. I don't know if you can see this, but it's off here, but one of my gamelons. So this mixer has a lot of purposes to it. I ended up buying a smaller mixer when I was gigging with my blues band. We haven't been since COVID. And I basically needed to have 2 inputs, 2 sets of left and right outs. I needed that for my wind synth, which was my Yamaha wind synth that was a left and right here. And then I also needed to mix in my VSTs. I was using a keyboard at the time, and then just taking the out from the computer. So I needed basically 4 inputs. And this was a simple option for me to do that. It's not a great mixer. It has delay and reverb built in, but it's nothing like what you're going to see with the R20. I also recently sold a Bastel Dude mixer that I used for my small, what I call my micro environment series. So I'm hoping this will serve the purpose of being able to record things for the micro environment series, plus do a bit more, as we're going to get into with this mixer and digital recorder, multi-track recorder. It does a lot of things. It has a touch screen control, not unlike a DAW. It has color coordination like a DAW does in terms of your channel tracks. You can bring in MIDI files. It has 18 synth sounds, which we'll go through all those sounds. I don't have high hopes, but it's kind of a cool little feature to have extra synth sounds here on the multi-track recorder. You can also bring in audio files, loops, and we'll see in the work through of the mixer today / multi-track recorder exactly how all these features work together and some of the possibilities. So obviously it's doing much more than a standard mixer. Standard mixers don't necessarily have the ability to do multi-track recording, so that's definitely an advantage. Now, I've also used in the past, just when I needed a summing mixer, this really cheap and unexciting, they call it professional multi-purpose 16 input ultra low noise line mixer. So this is almost like, I guess, a patch bay. You can't really do much with panning on this. So if you just needed to sum a lot of instruments, you could use something like this. This is actually a piece of gear that I never use and probably need to sell, but right now I don't think these are going for much on reverb, and it's a fairly hefty unit. As you're going to see with the R20, it's fairly light, just under 3 pounds, about 2 pounds, 14 ounces. So it's a nice opportunity to have something that will be easily transportable. Although it doesn't have battery power, I'm really hoping that this can be something I can use in my office to do some voice recordings. And in that regard, one of the reasons I decided to sell two of my mixers and pick up the R20 is I'm often using this mini Tascam recorder when I'm doing voiceovers at my, not at my home office, my office. If I'm at my home office, I use this mixer, the QU16, using the multi-track option here to record, and then the voiceover sound marvelous. I sometimes will use this in the office, either record it through the air with the two included microphones, or attach a lavalier mic to it, clip it to my lapel or whatever, and then record with it on an SD card. I'm hoping this will be an option, and let's actually get into, I know I said I was going to open the box, but I wanted to mention the mixer stuff because I think it's kind of interesting to think about exactly the sort of the niche that this mixer is filling in terms of who will buy it and what the uses will be for. So let's go ahead and dig in here and see what we get. So this has, it looks like the instruction manual, the quick tour, included items that they offer here in various languages, of course, warning us that this could cause serious injury or death. I suppose that could happen with a mixer. It has a Cubase LE, the limited edition with a serial number, so that's a little added bonus. And they also mention using this particular guitar software, this effects software I'm not familiar with, so we'll take a look at that today as well. So the adapter is included here. It's always nice. Sometimes with Zoom products, I owned years ago actually a higher end version of this, a Zoom version. I ended up selling it on Reverb because I didn't need multi-track. I just needed 2 channels, and this does the job. But what's kind of cool about, you know, getting the adapter already with the product is a lot of times these days, if you buy something, even kind of expensive gear, I'm trying to think just around here. I mean, a lot of these, they include the adapters, but there's some gear out there, some of the Korg Volca gear, for example, that doesn't include the adapters. And sometimes people, when I'm selling it, get upset because they're like, well, I need the adapter. And so you have to go on and buy the adapter for 10 or 15 bucks on Amazon. Fairly long cord here, you could see. Pretty long cord, I don't know, maybe 6 feet or something like that. It features one of these locking, if you can see that, we'll look at it more closely, but it has a locking option here, so that's going to prevent you from hopefully kicking, as happens to me in this studio, kicking a cord and knocking the thing over and being upset if it slams on the ground. I lost a laptop that way ages ago. It was actually an old laptop, but it happens. The box, you can see here, is fairly decent, again, decent size. It's well packed, and I'm thinking here, before I get a better option, I might go ahead and keep this cloth. It's, you know, very low grade, but it would give me an option to protect the screen. I'm sure screen protectors exist out there, and I'm sure you can get one of the nice plastic covers that are always typically pretty expensive, but if you really wanted that for your studio to protect it, you could certainly do that. And it does have the peel-off screen protector, which we'll remove to use the screen, but certainly it's something to consider in terms of the portability of this. Is one of the reasons I was excited about it. The other thing we're going to look at, and I'm just trying to remind myself of some of this stuff, I recently picked up a Poly Effects Hector, which is kind of off screen here, and it has a touch screen. I end up using one of these styluses with the touch screen because I find it a little fiddly. So one of the things I'm very curious about is to check out the response of the screen and to let you know how it works. Because one of the selling points, if you watch the demo video on the Zoom website, is this particular drummer is going through recording his band, and it's the idea that you can very easily work with this just like on a DAW, where you can take tracks, cut them, splice them, copy them, loop them, etc. So I'm really curious because for me that's one of the great selling points of the R20. And let's see how tight. Yeah, so that's really good. So you're not going to lose that. If you tripped on this, you would definitely be okay in terms of it not popping that out of there. You might still knock your mixer over. I was saying earlier, right, that if you hit your cord, but it's pretty sturdy, so that's going to definitely keep things in there as far as the adapter. I'm just looking on the side here, so there are some additional features. I'm assuming for firmware, there's a USB connector. I haven't looked at the instructions yet. And one of the things I want to do in this demo is to really not dive into the instructions, try to start off and see how intuitive the mixer is to work with, because they claim it's very easy to work with. So on the side panel, you're going to see an adapter for a Bluetooth setup that will allow you to use it with an iPad or iPhone, whatever. And then this is for your SD card. We'll start with that in a second and see how the formatting works. I'm just going to put this cap back in, this cover for that Bluetooth adapter that I'm not really that interested in. The bag's very simple. In addition to our locking adapter, we have the on-off switch. We have a monitor gain adjustment, so we can adjust our earphones, which are here, and then we have a left and right out. And we can also look at this for the potential of using this as a live mixer. Now, as you're working with it, just one thing I've noticed starting off with this, you know, the faders are not super, they're solid, and this whole unit is plastic. Again, it's super light. It doesn't feel sturdy like my QU16 mixer, but it feels a lot more sturdy than, say, my RC505. And I brought the 505 out because the RC505 often gets critiqued for having these very fiddly faders, which I don't think are as bad as people say, but the 505 is a really great piece of gear. It just came out in the MK2 version. But people often talk about these faders as being very insufficient, just in terms of how cheap they feel and how there's very little resistance or friction. In the case of the R20, these feel actually almost too much friction. You can kind of see here as I'm pushing up. Now I'm not using that much force, and you know, so you can see that they are. And I'm using a little bit of force here, and they're just, you know, kind of slowly creeping up there. So you kind of just see the faders that you get. Everything, again, is color coordinated. And when we turn on the unit, we're going to see then that these track and also your input gain adjustments for your 8 channels here, which can be 16 channels of multi-tracking. As you see here, these kind of double up. You have your recording arm buttons. But what's interesting about it is the color coding is going to match here on both your faders and your gain knobs. It's going to match then your track color here, which is really close to what you get on a DAW like Logic Pro X or something like that. So kind of interesting. You also, of course, have your control here. You have your click, your rewind, fast forward, record, play, stop. And then if you press stop while it's already stopped, it'll actually go to the start of the project. So again, try to maybe mimic some of that control that you get in your DAW with being able to very quickly move around within your tracks and so forth. I guess I would say that I wouldn't think of this. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm not expecting it to replace my DAW. I can't imagine getting to the point where eventually we're going to have all our VSTs on something like this. I know a lot of people are very much interested in DAW-less jamming or DAW-less applications because they don't want to lug around a laptop and have to deal with all that cumbersome aspects of bringing the laptop along. So again, this could be a real option for a lot of people out there in terms of using it for some of those DAW-less applications maybe that you're interested in. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom the camera in, and then I thought that we would go ahead and at least turn on the unit and you can see what it looks like when you first boot it up, just to get a sense of what we're getting into here. Now, I haven't yet put on, if there's new firmware, which I think there is. This is version 1.0. I haven't even messed with it. Again, this is a fairly brand new piece of equipment. So the first thing it's asking me to do is set the day and time. Okay, and it's actually the 31st. I'm recording this. We're going into 2022. Let's hope 2022 is a little better than the 2021. So this was very easy to do. I just used my fingers, and the touchscreen seemed pretty responsive to me. It's asking me to insert an SD card. So we'll go ahead and open the SD card. I picked up, let's cross our fingers, it will take either the sort of traditional, this is not the mini SD card, this is the full size. It'll either accept the traditional size or traditional speed, I suppose, or you can get the SDXC, which go up as far as 1 terabyte. And it will accept up to 1 terabyte as far as card size. You know, I just went with the 512 because I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if I'm going to have to record so much material on all the tracks that I'm going to need a terabyte worth of storage. So let's cross our fingers and hope that this card works. I can show you the brand. It's a PNY, and I'm forgetting how much these were. I want to say they were around $60 or $70. You know, not cheap, but they're supposedly elite, 512 gigabyte, really fast, I guess. And we're not working with video, so we maybe don't need the same response or performance as video. So you put the SD card in, it goes right side up, and looks like it works. Okay, so I didn't even have to format anything. And it looks like I can choose from templates and projects. And the templates have R&B, rock, hip hop, percussion, electronic, funk. And I'm actually going to wait because I want you to be able to see this screen very carefully, but I wanted to at least get to that part. Putting in the SD card, that was super easy. It looks like it didn't even have to format it. So let's dive in a little more here and actually work on some projects. And what I want to do is go through different scenarios. So we're going to try it with a variety of different gear. We're going to plug in some XLR mics just to see the possibilities there, say for doing narration on voiceover, so you'll hear my voice. I'm going to plug in some of my electroacoustic gear. We're going to try some things out with semi-modular gear and my small microenvironment setup to see exactly what we can do here. I also want to go in depth here and consider the use of the MIDI files, the onboard 18 voice or 18 tone synthesizer. We also want to look at the looping and definitely get into how this feels in terms of using it like we would use a DAW. So let's jump in more carefully here in more depth and look at the R20 here in action. Okay, as we get ready to look at the R20 and all its features, the physical and the software side of things, let's talk about some accessories that we might want to pick up to work with this multi-track recorder mixer. By the way, I'm doing my best here with the iPhone to record the screen. You'll just notice when I get into the software discussion of things and focusing on the screen, it's just really hard with the light for me to pick things up. So if you notice that coming up, I do apologize. But let's talk about some things you might want to get in addition to the mixer. Again, the mixer multi-track recorder comes with the unit, small instruction manual. You do want to go online to get the full instruction manual. It comes with that locking power cord, so you don't need to get an adapter. You will need to pick up an SD card. I'll talk about the particular brand of SD card that I've been using, and so far it's working well in terms of everything that I've tried with it, with loops and rhythm tracks. I am going to try it in just a bit with the recording, just to see how fast the write speed will keep up. Again, a lot of options for cards out there, but this is the one I decided to pick up. I also recommend a Stylus, and again, when I'm using my Hector, which is down here, which is a little larger touchscreen unit, I really like using it because I feel like it just gives me more control. Overall, I've found that using this, it's been fairly error-free, although a couple times you'll probably note just doing this that sometimes I fiddle with it a little bit, although right now it's doing a pretty good job here of keeping up with the pace of just doing the pinch in, pinch out kind of thing. But you just may want to look at a stylus as an option. Now, the other things out here, options probably will be fairly important. One is going to be for your side USB port, which is found here. And keep in mind, you can use that for basically three different things. The first is to connect with the Guitar Lab software, which will allow you to change some of the effects on here. That's a USB-C on the side, so you have to have a USB-C. The second thing would be a MIDI keyboard. As I mentioned later in this video, I just recently purchased one. I'm waiting for a USB-C to be adapter so that I can use my Arturia keyboard with this. Although, as you'll see later in this video, I don't know if I would buy a MIDI keyboard just for using the 19 sounds in this device. They are not good, and I'll just say that up front. I love the mixer, multi-track recorder, but the sounds are not in any way part of the calling card of this particular device. The third thing you might also need is a USB drive. Now, you can certainly get by with your SD card, and that's all you really need. But if you want to do anything like saving projects or uploading anything from the unit or to your computer, you could get a USB drive. You will need USB-C. I don't know about you. I haven't seen a USB-C drive. So you could look for that for sure. If you want that Bluetooth adapter, which I'm not particularly interested in, that would go in this slot here. You could also pick that up as far as an accessory. But I think you could do a great job just getting your SD card and the mixer. multi-track recorder. I call it a mixer and multi-track recorder because, as you see in this demo video, we can use it certainly live with our PA system. In this demo today, I'll just be taking the two outs here and using those to give you a sense of what the sound is like directly from the unit, and then we'll also compare that on the computer as we listen to some of the recorded sound. Now, the next thing I think probably would be important, and that is just to consider something to deal with the inputs. Again, when we go over the inputs of the unit, the channels 1 and 2 are a combined XLR, so XLR will fit in here, and it's going to have the same orientation here as your other ones, so the spare pin or the orphan pin would go at the bottom. And channels 1 and 2 will also take a quarter inch input, so you just kind of pop that in there. They have to fit a little harder in there, but they definitely work once you push it in there. And so that will get you set for channels 1 and 2. So for 1 and 2, you really do have the option. As you can see here, that's really tight. I've noticed that with these combined, they're not my favorite, but they're super handy. But channels 1 and 2 give you the option of quarter inch or XLR. Now, when you get into 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, the remaining 6 channels, you have to think about that you have to use the XLR at this end. So you do have some options there. By the way, let's keep in mind that only channels 5 through 8 have phantom power. So if you have microphones like mine here that require phantom power, you can only use them with these 4 channels, or you could get some kind of box or something to power it. There are devices out there that would give you some options. I mention this because if you're thinking about recording a band, obviously you're going to run out of inputs depending on how much you're recording. Even though you have 16 tracks at one time simultaneous, and we're going to do some tests here in a bit, we're going to see how fast this keeps up recording multiple tracks. But having these 8 tracks means you're going to run out of mics or whatever you're using to record your live band. So something to think about. You could always use a submixer, a summing mixer or whatever, and then just have your keyboardist or electronics coming in lines 1 and 2 out of their mixer, and then you could use the other channels for any of the other recording, your guitarist, bass player, drummer, etc. So what I might recommend for channels 3 through 8 would be picking up some of these adapters. You have different types out there. So this will go XLR to the dual stereo mini jack, the 1/8 inch. If you have a mono, I think it should play that as just the mono. We'll have to try that out. Now another one might be this cable, and this one appears to be, the tip is also stereo, so I'm going to try these out and see if they work. They've worked on some other mixers. This is going to go XLR to quarter. So all you're going to have to do for that, of course, is plug your XLR in. And actually, in this case, that's not going to work. Okay, so this is actually female. So the one I want, and I have them elsewhere, is actually going to do the reverse. So this is not going to help me here. I want the female, I want the male XLR, not the female XLR. But I do have some of those just to the side here, and you're not going to get to see them now. But that's just some recommendations as far as some options that you might think about picking up some additional accessories to go with the R20. All right, so we can go ahead and get started here and looking at the R20 by Zoom. I'll go ahead and turn on the unit. By the way, if you're curious, this would actually fit perfectly in a laptop bag like this. I'm not going to put it in here because I have it hooked up, but it'll fit in here perfectly, and you can carry it around, and it's really small, just like a laptop size bag. So one of the things that the R20 does really well is it creates this form factor that is super easy to use and take with you, and it's definitely an on-the-go kind of mixer and multi-track recorder. So I've had the chance to spend about an hour so far with the R20, going back and forth, mainly just checking the layout, which we'll go through here right now. So I actually mentioned earlier the guitar software, and it's the Guitar Lab software, and I just below here have a Zoom multi-effects pedal, and it actually didn't realize uses the same software. So we're also going to look at that in this video. And in fact, right now I'm thinking this probably will be 2 videos because there's enough to cover in terms of layout, in terms of some of the software issues, and also in terms of recording setups. I think it warrants doing 2 videos. So be on the lookout for the second video as well. Okay, so right now let's take a look at the Guitar Lab option that you have for the R20. And as I mentioned before, I have another Zoom product which is the G3N, and this particular product also uses the Guitar Lab software, and so I'll just have it up on the screen now so you can get a sense of what it's like. Now I should say that this particular unit, the G3N, is much more powerful. You can do multi-effects and I believe more varied effects, certainly more editing. We'll go through a little bit later in this video some options you have to edit the effects. There are some limitations with the insert and the send effects. You can do one insert effect. You can do send effects on all your tracks, and we'll talk about the difference between those. But looking at the Guitar Lab software, you see that you can go on and do some editing of patches, so it has some good functionality. You can also have options to transfer new patches to the R20, so you will have some options there. Again, I'll say in this video that I think there are good opportunities for guitarists and instrumentalists to use some of these effects as a live option that also allows you to record everything that you're performing. So I think the effects here with Guitar Lab could be a good option for you. I have to say I haven't had the chance yet to demo the patch editor and transferring patches to the R20 back and forth. So we'll save that actually for part 2 of the video to talk more about the Guitar Lab effects opportunities with the R20. What I'll do is I'll time index both of these so that you have a chance to really see what you want to try to find. I've looked at some of the Zoom videos here on YouTube, and a lot of questions people have. For example, people can't get the MIDI files to work. Very easy solution to that. We'll go over that today. So we'll talk about a lot of different things. We'll take it through all the various tests, and we'll discuss how this might work in your work setup, whatever that happens to be. Trying to use the different cameras here as well to give you a sense of seeing what's actually happening here as we're doing it. So the first thing to notice is when you turn on the mixer, if you have a current project going, you're going to get something like this here. And what that is it's your current project. So what you could do is start off with a brand new project, which we'll do. And I've decided to use the Stylus just to see how it works. Again, I've been using that with my Polyhector effects unit, and I think it's a little more precise. So we'll see how that goes. My vision is not what it used to be years ago, so I may also put these on. Excuse the lack of aesthetic look of these, but we'll give it a shot here. So the first thing you're going to do is actually click on projects here, and this is the place where you can decide if you want a brand new project, if you want to load a current project, or if you want to use a template. And actually, before we do any of that, let's go back and do a format here. So this system setting, which, using the gear icon, you're always going to find your settings. This is actually quite important because some of the stuff I discovered that isn't in the manual is found here in this system setting. For example, if you want to use Guitar Lab and hook that up, you'll click this and then you'll plug in your USB cable here. And it is a USB-C cable. We'll talk about some cable issues as well today. Just some things you may want to get. I just, for example, ordered a USB-C, which is what the R20 uses, and that'll convert from a USB-B. It gets confusing with all the letters. So I can use my Arturia with it in terms of the MIDI sequencing. Now, so if you want to adjust the brightness of the unit, you could do that here. So you could see that would be good if you were in light versus dim conditions. Again, this does not have an external battery, so you don't have an option there unless you have another power option that allows you to plug in your hardware, and probably most people don't have something like that. I did note a couple of comments on YouTube critical of the fact that it's not able to take portable battery power. Again, different units are designed with different purposes and uses in mind, and I'm not sure what they were thinking of. For me, that's not a deal breaker, not having a battery source. It's not something I'm going to worry about. Now, if you want to use the audio interface, kind of the same deal. You could decide a multi-track or stereo mix, and then it'll immediately get recognized. In my case, I have a Mac. I actually contacted Zoom's helpline tonight because when I was going through the documentation, I couldn't discover a driver for a Mac. I only saw the driver for Windows. I'm thinking now probably you don't need a Mac driver. It's just like a USB drive that you plug in or some peripherals that don't need a driver. That's probably my guess. I'll let you know in video 2 once I hear back from the folks at Zoom. If you want to use your MIDI keyboard, you would just hit on and then that would allow you to plug it in. Again, I still need an adapter cable to do that. The SD card, the firmware version, I'm assuming they're still at 1.0. I haven't seen a new firmware online, and I haven't yet figured out how that's going to be done. I think it's probably involving a zip file and plugging in your USB cable, but thus far, it's still on version 1.0, and this is a fairly new unit that I just got, so that is my guess. Now let's go ahead and do the firmware, or let's go ahead and do the SD card. When I first turned on the unit and plugged in that SD card, I said I don't have to format it. I read in the manual that if you do a format, it could help the performance. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to click the format, and I'm going to hit execute. You'll see that spin and do its work, and that was really quick. So I'll hit close. I didn't have any projects in there. Again, don't do that unless you have things backed up or you don't mind deleting the contents of your SD card. So as you can see here, it's now blank. Before we had projects, it's now blank. Now these templates are interesting, and what I'm going to do today is I decided I have 2 quarter outs going into my main mixer here. I was going to do like the microphone, record it on the R20. I'll do that later so you get a sense of the quality, and maybe we can compare with my setup here with the Allen & Heath QU16. I just decided for ease of doing things, I'll record on my other mixer, my Allen & Heath, my microphone narration here, and I'll take the line outs here, which would be a great use, by the way, for a small band. You could use this as a mini PA mixer. You could take this out and these 2 line outs and plug that into your PA system if you wanted to do that. The nice thing about that use is you could record an entire band using this nice array of XLR inputs. So essentially you'd have 8 stereo channels, again 16 channels total. As you're going to see in a second, the access of channels 9 through 16 comes through the software, not through the hardware here. There's nothing on the panel that allows you physically to switch to 9 to 16. You're going to do that actually on the touch screen here. So, if you recorded a band and you were doing, stereo arrays, percussion and other things, obviously you could run out of tracks very quickly. There are other options that you could have a summing mixer or a sub mixer, plug it into here for say your keyboardist and some of your other parts, and then maybe use the other channels for your guitarist, bass player, and your drummer, depending on miking scenarios and all that kind of fun stuff. But the nice thing is you could record a heck of a lot on here using a relatively small SD card. Again, it can go up to 1 terabyte total. And it really is handy in the sense of having it in your performance space if you're doing a gig or something. What I want to use it for in the future is I've done some gigs with my live looping setup with my RC505 and some of my other synths and keyboards and even a wind synth. This is going to be perfect for that because the last time I did this gig, I dragged my giant QU16 out and I had to drag the stand and everything. This is going to be really nice. I have these pretty cool brackets that mount on top of like a desk or a table, like a DJ table, and it allows you to put items like this or the 505 on there. So this will be my go-to mixer, and that's why I was saying earlier I got rid of some of my other smaller mixers because I really wanted to do something that would be useful in a couple of different performance and musical settings. So the first thing you'll see, again, we went to that gear icon and clicked on projects. Most of the stuff is described in the manual. The manual is really detailed and fairly good in a lot of areas, not in all the areas. And I'm assuming as they update firmware and features, they will probably update the manual as well. So if you click on these templates, these are kind of interesting and a little bit funky. They're kind of based on genres. So rock, R&B, electronic, hip hop, percussion, funk, scrolling down. And by the way, you could do this with your finger as well. I'm just kind of used to using the stylus. If you get one of these styluses, by the way, from Amazon, I think they're about 10 bucks. They come with these different tips. And I was just thinking that could be handy for a lot of your musical settings because you could decide on the level of precision that you want and really kind of hone in on tapping. And it also comes in with one of these holders. And again, I use it all the time for my Poly Hector. This is, by the way, not a terrible size screen. When I compare it to the Hector is bigger. It's a couple inches longer, maybe 2 or 3, and about 1 inch higher. I read someone critical of a lot of the features of the R20 here on YouTube, just looking at some videos today, and the person was saying for something like this, you need no smaller than an 8-inch screen. Well, if you do an 8-inch screen, that's going to really expand the unit. there's only so much you can do. So I'm actually really impressed with the form factor of this unit. The fact that they fit so much, they have the physical layout here, very compact and ergonomic. Again, the faders are a little bit stiff, but I think it's going to be okay over time. Might loosen up a little bit. It's nice how the master is red. The transport control here is nice. That replicates what you might see in your DAW. And I really like the fact that we have the color coordination that you're going to see. So as far as this issue that someone was critical saying the size of the screen is too small, I tend to disagree with that because I think there's only so much you can do if you're trying to keep the unit to a small size like this so it's backpack compatible or laptop case compatible, so forth. So let me just click on one of these and show you what these templates are. So we'll click on hip hop and I'm going to put on the headphones and you'll hear this again live. Everything you're hearing is not directly recorded into the mixer. I'm taking the line out and I have to hit the create button. And then that's what you're hearing going through my other mixer. So it makes it a little easier for me here doing this for the recording. It takes a second or two for this to load. And by the way, I have my headphones on and I'm using the headphone out. It has a quarter out. You can, of course, take your eighth and plug your adapter in. And then it has a handy volume control. So this is really easy also to monitor. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is the click track is lit up. You can actually go in and turn that on or off. And there is a setting for the click track, and I'm trying to remember where everything is. Oh, it's right here. So I can turn the click track on or off. I can choose a pre-count, and then I can decide on the sounds I want. Let me put on my glasses here to read these. So you can click you can have the click be a bell, a click, a stick, a cowbell, or a hi-hat. And you know, there's definitely some opportunities here to use this in settings where maybe you're recording live instruments, percussion instruments, and you need a click track to go along with it. This is going to be super handy. So having that is definitely great. You can look at snapping here. So snapping is not unlike, say, in Logic, where you can make sure that if you have a new part, a loop, a MIDI file, whatever, it's always going to snap to that grid, however you define the grid. You can't necessarily define the grid in here in the same kind of increments. They do have a setting on here for the time signature, so we'll keep things at 4/4. I know someone was saying they were upset that you could only choose between 3/4, 4/4, and 6/8. So again, you have to think about everything in the context of what you're getting here. For $399, you know, I don't necessarily expect to get 20 different time signatures, and time signatures may not matter that much depending on how you're using your equipment. If you're doing a heck of a lot of ambient sound recording and sound effects and doing electroacoustic stuff, you may never even need you know, a time signature, a meter in terms of what you're doing if it has an ambient feel. If it's percussion or something else, you know, then there are questions, I guess, to be asked. You can choose the tempo here with the slider. We'll just leave it at the current setting. And then you can choose a count in or not. So that would be the main aspect of what you see on this menu. So for now, we'll leave the click on there just so you get a sense of what it sounds like. Now, you see with this template setup, they're actually adding in already some drum tracks. And you're going to see those here appearing on tracks 5 and 6. Whenever you have a track that is either audio that you're doing a recording of, audio that you'll bring in, and I'll show you how you do that later. So because this is a template, they're throwing in percussion, and we can scroll through and see all of our tracks all the way down to 16. Again, we can scroll up using the stylus or not. And it takes a little while to do this. So, you know, when you think about doing this in your DAW versus doing it here, it's going to be much quicker, at least for me, using a mouse going into Logic Pro than going in here and working with things. But again, this could have some different uses for you apart from your digital audio workstation. If you're recording a lot of VSTs, only I could not see a reason to get the R20. I don't really think it's for that purpose. It's for other purposes, recording live sound, maybe bringing in some audio. You know, the rhythm is always nice. A lot of guitar effects pedals have built-in rhythms, and sometimes if you're doing a recording, it's helpful to have that to play along with, just to work on a groove or a beat or whatever. In some cases, like maybe even in this case, I think some of these are actually usable. It will actually put in, as you can see from the transients here, it will put in main beats and add fills. It really reminds me very closely of the drummer tracks that you can get when you click on Logic Pro and decide on those preset drummer tracks, which are equally impressive and certainly more customizable. Okay, so right now, let's go ahead and do something with the rhythm tracks. So I think the rhythm tracks are a feature here that maybe some of you will like and others will dislike. I'm sort of mixed on the rhythm tracks. So later in this video, because I was creating it and I didn't have a chance to mess around with things, I was talking about how some aspects of using the rhythm tracks here in the R20 mimic the drummer feature in Logic Pro X. I think that's a little overstated, because if you know anything about what you can do in Logic Pro X, you can go in and really customize fills, you can do complexity of the beat, you can really choose a lot of things with the patterns, certainly the drum kits. This is very limited with the rhythm. So let's go through it and take a look, and then again, you can make a decision based on whether this is going to meet your needs. I think primarily this could be useful for someone who's jamming, and maybe for somebody who is working on creating a particular beat or doing a recording and they just want a beat playing, and there are some different options here. You're quite limited with a select set of patterns, and I will put those up on the screen so you could see those in this section. Now, if you create something via a template, it will automatically put in the type of pattern based on what you choose. So hip hop versus percussion versus rock. You can't go in and do edits on any of these patterns, whether you create them with a template or you create your own selection on projects. So let's go ahead and create a new project, and we'll hit create on that. And what I'm going to be looking at here for the three types of tracks, the MIDI track, keyboard track, the audio track, which is default, and the percussion or rhythm track, is I'll click the middle one, and that's our percussion track. It automatically defaults to stereo because these are all recorded in stereo. So you see that tracks 1 and 2 here on our mixer are now taken up on our digital screen because they're only recorded in stereo. So what we can do is we can go in and choose our selection, and we'll just click that. Okay, so now if we want to select the rhythm that we want to use with this track, these tracks 1 and 2, you're going to remember we're going to click the library button. That always has your selections for things like effects, for audio tracks, for the keyboard tracks, those amazing 19 patches. I know, I'll stop complaining about the keyboard patches. And then for the percussion or rhythm tracks, we'll click on that. And these are all our options. Right now, let me turn up my mixer volume, and I'm just going to check it over here. And you should be hearing this. Let's give it a shot. To turn up my main fader, there we go. We're hearing it now. Let me just grab my headphones and make sure this is happening. As you're hearing it, I'm hearing it, hopefully. A little bit of a delay there. Okay, so, a couple things to note there. One is, these compared to the keyboard tracks, these sound really good. And these sound like they're actually recorded in a studio. They sound very professional. The disadvantage, of course, is these are pure audio files. So as you scroll down, you're going to see all the options for your rhythm tracks. And, you could think about the BPM. So if you have something that's at 168 versus 90 versus 120, how many does that amount to? Now, just looking at this, because we have things like the chorus, the outro, and the intro, and the verse, and the bridge, you could see that at least there's variation. So if you decide to add one of these, like if I wanted to add the rock chorus, I could hit the add button. Again, the play button is to preview the sound. So I'll add this to my track, and let's see what happens. And then we can go in and add a second one. So again, if I want to go back to my beginning of the track, it's already there. I could hit the stop button twice. I'll hit play. And you'll notice here that it continues even if there's, not unlike a DAW, it continues even if there's nothing else there. So what I can do now is, again, this trick is if I just tap on the top of the ruler there, it'll go to where I want to add my next bit of sound. So let's add another one. I think we said we were on Was it the funk? It was the rock chorus. I think that was this one. Well, let's see what happens here. So we had the chorus, funk rock. Let's do a bridge as well. We'll add that in. Takes a little bit of time to add it. And then let's add, we'll just continue to click there. Kind of missed it. There we go. Again, we have the snapping on, so that's very helpful to get us to the next bar. So let's go ahead and add one final one. We'll do the outro perhaps on this. We were funk rock, so we'll do funk rock outro again. We can preview it here. Okay, and let's go ahead and add that. There is just a little bit of delay here, as you're seeing with your rhythm loops. If you're wondering, we'll talk about this later, there is a maximum on any project of 50 audio regions and or rhythm regions. So one thing that could get tricky for you and any of us that want to use a lot of loops, load those in as audio files, or these rhythm tracks is, if I do 50 of these, I'm done. And then I can't go back and add more. So it's one disadvantage maybe of this unit is that limitation on memory. I'm assuming that's an internal memory thing. That's not anything connected to our SD card. So what we can do now though is we've set up 3 of these. Let's go back to the beginning and let's hit play and see what those sound like together. Oh, and we have the click going. Okay, sorry about that. The click was also going. I was hearing another clicky thing going on. So I think if we zoom out here, again, you'll notice by looking at the transients here of our drum beats, you can see, I think, the different patterns. I'm assuming, I didn't have the headphones on, I'm assuming you are hearing 3 different patterns there because that's what we did select. Now, one thing I want to mention, you can do this with audio files and also with rhythm files, is you can do a stretch of sorts. And let me try this actually and see if it'll work. So this is the way to move things. So if you ever want to move something, you could do it that way. And then I believe if we double click, okay, yeah, we're just going to pull that bar. So there's actually a possibility here. This might be doing one of 2 things. This might actually be doing what they call a loop here. So what it does is it'll take and add, almost like in Logic, more bars of the same pattern. And I think that's what's happening here. Let me try to, still getting used to this clicking. So let's play right there and hear what is coming out and then listen through the headphones here. Yeah, so that's indeed what we were hearing. So we were essentially hearing what they call a loop, and I don't really like the name of it because all you're doing really is adding more of the same region. And I think in this case, the only advantage of that is even though we're adding, say, 3 copies of that, what looks to be like a 4-bar phrase, I think that's creates 7 through, or maybe a 2-bar phrase, excuse me. I think that's still only counting as one region, so it's not going to count against our 50 max limit that we're kind of talking here as a memory limitation. So let me go ahead and try something because I know we can do this. We can do what they call waveform editing. I think you can do it for the rhythm tracks. I know you can do it for audio. So to activate that, we're going to click on our edit, which is the little scissors. And indeed we can. So when you see this stretch indicator, this allows you to change the length or the duration, basically the same thing, of any of your loops or audio files or your rhythm tracks without changing the pitch. So this is somewhat like that time stretching that is very common in loopers in today's day and age, the 505, Ableton Live, all the different kind of flex editing you could do within Logic Pro. So I believe what we'll do is we'll click these arrows here. Let me try that and see if that works. Or, let's see. I'm trying to see if that's actually changing it. No, that's just allowing me to zoom out. So it should be this here, I think. Okay, so it's supposed to be done this way. Okay, now I got it. And by the way, you only use this. If you want to trim an audio file, we'll look at that later, you wouldn't click that button. This button is just for doing this operation here of trying to stretch or compress the pitch of something. And let me see, I think that should be changing the pitch of it, perhaps. If we hit play, will it work? I'll have to hit done first. Let's see. Looks like it did change it because it was asking me if I wanted to rename it since there is a change in it. Okay, let's give this a shot. Where was that change? I think it was right here. Yeah, there's definitely a change there. Okay, so yeah, it appears that it did it for that whole region. It definitely seems like it's at the same tempo. It sounds like there's just the process that it uses to do the stretching. It almost sounds like it went through a filter or something. Kind of has an odd character to it now in terms of the quality of the sound. So in any case, these are the rhythm tracks. If you want to use these, great. If you don't have to use them. Again, some disadvantages would be the fact that you're limited to 50 of these total, including your audio clips. So that's going to be a potential limitation. The other thing, of course, is the limitation of the types of genres of music. If you want heavy metal, they don't really have heavy metal. There are 15 different styles, and each of those, as you saw when we were adding through our library button, has verse, bridge, chorus, intro, outro, and so you have a number of variations for each of those 50 styles. Again, you only have maybe one or two styles with the same or with different BPMs, so you have to just think about the fact that you don't have a lot of variation. It's certainly not going to give you the ability to do edits, to do something like you could on a Beat Buddy or other synthesizers or equipment out there that allows you customization of rhythms. So getting this just for the rhythms is probably a bad move, but having this as a bonus, as something you could use to say practice with a particular track or recording you're trying to do with the band. You don't have a drummer right now. Let's say your drummer is sick, and so you could just play through this depending on the style and just do your work on your song. So it's definitely a possibility, something to think about in terms of here using the rhythm tracks with the R20. One thing I want to show you here as you log into the screen, and we'll get out of this template later so we can look at an original project. You really do want to get a sense of what you're seeing here on top of the screen. Again, there's correspondence between the color here and the faders and also these knobs, which are your gain adjustment for each of your 8 tracks or 16 tracks, again, digitally by clicking this button right here. And again, we'll look at this later, but by clicking this button here, you'll be able to choose between the first set of 8 tracks or the next set of 9 through 16, the next set of 8 tracks. So because this is in green, you're going to see here this fader here, which is track 5 and track 6. It is a stereo track, so you're going to see that that corresponds with the green color as it does here. Likewise, when we go up here, when we go to track 3, we see that that's orange. That has an orange color next to it. And again, that's very similar to what you see in Logic. Logic, you can go in and customize the color of the track headers. You can also customize the color of the track itself and really work on groupings and stuff. And color coordination is something that I haven't done a lot in Logic with, but I'm doing more because it really is your friend in terms of doing organization. Now, if you're wondering here, we'll talk about this when we get into importing files, but because this is a stereo drum track, you see that it's using both 5 and 6. And we're getting the color just of 5 here because it's basically considering this as one main track because it's stereo. And by the way, you can go in on any track. For example, if we choose track 1, we click on it and you see it's selected there. So that gray means the track is selected. So I could click on that and go into my settings and decide if I want to do something in stereo. And as they were trying to load in stereo audio files into one track, and you'll get an error notice. Anytime you want to adjust the track settings, you're actually going to click on that little space there, and then you could either delete, export the track, or click track settings. This is where you would go in and make your adjustment for stereo audio. So if you want to do a stereo link, you're going to click the on button. We go back to the track itself, and now look at that. So just like it does with tracks 5 and 6, because it's stereo, it has taken the red from tracks 1 and 2, or I'm sorry, the orange. It looks like track 1 is a kind of muted amber or something like that. So it's made both tracks 1 and 2 that same color. So what that means is, in a sense, because it's stereo, you're losing a track. The other way you could work with this, and we could go back to our track settings and turn this off, and it should go back to normal. I haven't tried this yet. Let's give that a shot. And indeed, it's back to normal, so we're getting our colors back. So you can always bring in or import mono audio files and then just use one track. Okay, so I wanted to show you one additional trick that might be useful. If you want to, again, you can go into your menus for under your track settings for any track and choose the stereo link if you want to have the option to bring in some stereo files. So if you don't want to do that, another option, the quick trick here, is for any of your 2 channels. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and of course, when it is 9 through 16, you would hold one button of the record button and hit the other as you're holding it, and that will turn both adjacent channels into stereo mix. So if you just do it normally, like if I take track 6 and I hit record, it's still a mono track. If I now choose 7 and 8 to be stereo, I'll press one of these and hit the other. And then you're going to see they should both be aligned now. Yeah, they're indeed both aligned. So if I hit one record, they both are armed. If I hit this record, they're both armed. So that's a quick trick to avoid having to do the menu diving if you want to create a stereo link between 2 channels. You can also go in and adjust the panning settings, and that would be another opportunity to really take control of the panning. You could see here I can go center, I could go hard right 100, hard left 100, and then they have, I like the software on this unit because sometimes it's hard with a stylus or a finger. This is where it would get a little tricky. So if I wanted it exactly on center, I might have to play with it a little bit. So what's cool is they have these increment buttons, negative and plus. So if I'm just a few off, if I'm R4, I'm just 4 clicks to the right. To get it back to center, I can click it those 4 times, and very easily I don't have to fiddle with it, whether I have a stylus or not. You can also do per track, high, low, and mid EQ adjustment. The send level is here, so if you want to do a send effect, you can adjust how much of that effect you want, and then you're going to click, this is all per track. So in this sense, it really replicates some features of, say, a looper like the RC505. I want to make it very clear here in doing this, and I've worked with a lot of loopers. I've currently own the 505. I'm also have a Cosmos by Soma on order. It's been on order for like 8 months. Hoping that comes in soon. And I sold a third looper recently, the Loop Station. And so I've used a lot of loopers. This in no way, I would say, replicates or replaces a looper. You could use it with a looper to great effect for your recording and also mixing in your other signals. The 505, the current version, which I have, I know the MK2 improves on this, the current version of the 505 doesn't have a lot of potentials for mixing. So if you want something to mix and also record, this could be very helpful. But just to make things clear, I don't think anyone is going to say that this is replicating a looper. Although you can bring in audio files, you can add audio files to tracks, you can copy and paste those. Currently in this firmware, there's nothing that allows you to do complex looping that you can do on a lot of loopers like the 505 or certainly on Ableton or even with Logic Pro, as they've in a sense copied the Ableton looping features within Logic. So just want to make that clear because I think some people might think this could do looping in the sense of a looper. It really can't, at least in the firmware that is currently with this unit. So again, I can adjust the send level of my effect, and I can go in and do all these various effects. It has, I believe, currently 40 loaded, and then it has up to 50, and these remaining 10 then are empty. And I'll show you a little bit later in this video or in part 2 how we go in and use Guitar Lab to customize our effects. And by the way, I really think that could be one feature for this unit that could be killer and really great for guitarists or some instrumentalists who want to have effects available. You could play live, you could have some nice effects on your track or tracks, and then you could also record. The recording, you could leave those non-affected if you wanted to and deal with post-production effects or whatever. But having that could be useful because in a sense, you're getting a little bit of a multi-effect stomp box here inside of the R20. Not as full-fledged as some of the other Zoom and other units out there, but I think decent enough certainly for some purposes. So to sum this up, you have two types of effects here on the R20. You have a send effect, and a send effect can be used on any channel. And it allows you, and let's just go ahead and look at this. So to access this, we could hit our channel and hit track settings. And I would scroll down here. The send level is here, so that's the amount of your effect. And then the type of effect is here. You could choose if you wanted a hall reverb. And you can actually go in and do some simple edits of this. So this is fairly decent having this on board. So you can decide the level. You can go in and adjust some of these parameters. You know, it's not necessarily going to be something that you can do a lot of adjustments to, but that's pretty good for a unit like this. If you want more, again, you want to check out Guitar Lab, that software, which we'll cover more extensively in video 2, part 2 of this review. So this is actually fairly impressive. You can go in and adjust quite a few of the parameters of any of your effects. So if you want to do that, go ahead and make those edits there. So again, we're looking here at the send effects, and the send and insert effects are the same set of effects, but they're used in different ways. So the way you're going to use your send effect is apply it to any of the tracks. You can apply it to all the tracks if you want. Again, you can choose the level. Keep in mind the compressor, limiter, and gate are also included per track and separate from the effects. So once I've chosen my send effect, that will be available on my track. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that the send effect will not take effect in the final recording. So if you hit record and record something in, although you're going to hear your reverb playing in that particular channel, when you record it to the SD card and export it later, when you record it to the SD card, it's not recording the effect to that. Now you can have the option in Mixdown to have the send effects appear in the final mix. The difference is for the insert effect can actually or will have an effect on the recording. So depending on the insert effect that you use, once you use that, that is going to be automatically recorded into that track and then can't be changed after the fact, as opposed to the send effect that can be changed later. So now you might be wondering, okay, we figured out the send effect. How do you do the insert effect such that you can have it recorded to your final recording? Well, you would actually click, in this case, on your library tab or button. Effect is in use on send. Okay, so it's telling me, let me go to track 5 and try it there. Interesting, so it's telling me now, I know there's a limitation. You can only use one insert effect. So it appears as if there's an insert effect being used on one of these tracks. So our quickest solution for the sake of our demo today is let's do a brand new project and start from scratch. So I'm going to click New Project and Create. Again, we're talking about limitations today. We discussed limitations with the rhythm tracks. One limitation you're going to note in terms of the effects that you can use is you can only use one insert effect on one track. You can use send effects on all the tracks. So let's try now to insert on channel 1 an insert effect, and hopefully we won't get that error. So we'll click on our library icon. Effect is in use on send. Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm wondering how I get around that. Okay, so at this point I'm a little baffled, because my only assumption is that maybe one of these tracks, I hit New Project, so I wonder if the default is to create a send effect on one of these tracks. I'm just trying to figure out how to determine that. So let's click Track Settings and see if send level says anything. So yeah, it says it has number 33. So let's change 33 to vocal radio effect. Maybe that's the issue because that is already an effect in use. So now let's go to track 3. I don't want to click the track 3 gray bar there or square because what I want to do is choose my effect from. Nope, it's saying it's already in use. Okay, interesting. So what is the send effect on track 3? Let's go ahead and click this for send effect. And we have that same radio effect. Interesting. So I assumed that each of these send effects could be different per track, but I wonder if that's no longer if that's not true. So let me go to track 5, track settings, and I'm wondering if the same send effect is going to pop up. Send effect is 31, so let's change it to 28. Okay. Now my question is, will all the tracks now have 28, right? You see what I'm getting at here? So let's go to track 6 and track settings, and let's look at our send effect. And it is, sorry, gotta find it. And it is indeed, yeah, it's 28. Interesting. So that's looking to me like, I don't have the manual in front of me, but that's looking to me like now all tracks have effect number 28. So, which is our, vocal ensemble. Interesting. Okay. So, perhaps then that means that you can't have separate effects on each of the tracks. I was assuming you could. If that's the case, I guess what you could do is just use a reverb, like a plate reverb or a room, some generic reverb if you want that to play live. But obviously if you had an effect that was very distinctive playing on one track, you wouldn't necessarily want to have that same effect on all the other tracks. I assumed you could do simultaneous different effects on all the tracks. If any of that changes and I find out more, I'll let you know when we go over the Guitar Lab software in part 2 of this video. So I'm just going to try to scroll down again. I'm frustrated that I can't get the insert effect to work. So let me click on the library and it's saying effect is in use on send. Well, what if I change the effect to derive? Then can I use the insert effect? Let's see. Okay, apparently I was able to do that. Okay, so that at least looks like it's working. So I can do the send effect on all the channels, the same type, and then it looks like, yeah, the insert effect is on use on the other track. So all I would do is change that to a different insert effect. Again, you can only use one insert effect on one track. So, you know, it appears as if that's true. If you can only use one send effect for all of your tracks, there is definitely a limitation there. Unless you would go in when you do a mix down and export each track, and I haven't gotten to tracks exporting yet, but if you could export each track individually, which I know you could then maybe use a different send effect per track. Not super convenient, but maybe that's kind of how this particular unit works. I know in the case of my QU16 over here, it has effects, but it's very similar in terms of you can't customize different effects per track. So maybe that's what we're dealing with a little bit here in terms of the R20's use of effects. Okay, now since we're talking about effects, one other feature you're going to find on the send menu is your tuner. So to access the tuner, you're going to click your track. Let's click track 7 and click on track settings. And then we'll click on our effect. And then anytime you click on that edit button on any of your effects, which is right here, so any of these, just click that, it's going to pull up this, and that is your tuner indicator. So you'll click on that tuner button. And then you have some options here for tuning, and let's just plug something in. Okay, in this case, we'll use our Soma, sorry, as I knock everything over here. We're going to use the Soma Divina. So I'll just plug my input into channel 1. Oops, and that's my high Z channel. I think you're getting a sense there of those quarter inputs on track 1. They just are really sticky, so it kind of forced my stand down here. So what I just want to do here is put in channel 1, And I should probably turn on the high Z, which is on. And I don't know if you're hearing anything. I have to arm it. There we go. Just going to put the headphones on to hear this. I could adjust the gain too. Okay, adjusting the gain. So you have different types of tuners. You have a guitar tuner, which should tell you your strings. Not going to really work on the Divina since it's not a 6-string instrument. But you get the idea here. You can also do flat tuning if you want, adjusting that. So, you know, as a tuner goes, I would say this is a fairly decent tuner. Again, I think having the rhythm, having also this option for tuning, suggests to me at least that this could be an accompaniment for a guitarist or a string player or an instrumentalist, because having the tuner here is certainly a handy feature. You don't have to bring your tuner along, just pop it in one of the channels. Presumably if it's a guitar, put it on channel 1, have that high Z on, and then that will allow you to do your tuning. So it's very handy to have this built into the R20. We can also talk a little bit about tempo. So you're familiar with the fact that there's a click track. So one of the things we can do, let me just go ahead and zoom our camera out. I have been beyond frustrated trying to get the screen to look decent for all of you in the video, but it's just really hard with the screen here. Either I get lights from the top or I get this where you're not seeing the actual natural color. But you know about the click track, we can turn that on or off. So as far as tempo, a couple things to note about tempo. We can click on this at any time under project settings and do a tempo adjustment. Again, you can do plus or minus. I'm not going to change it. And you can adjust it, you know, faster or slower tempo. I believe it goes from 40 some to, is it 255 or 250? Yeah. Okay. So again, choose the tempo you want. If you want to go in, it does it by points. So not unlike, say, Logic, so you can actually go 120.1, 120.2. If I go back to here, the other thing that is worth noting is there's also a tap tempo. And I believe for the tap tempo, we have to have the project settings open, but I'm going to try it first here to see if it works. Nope, it's still at 120. Okay, so indeed, actually, the quick way to get here is I can just click on the tempo here, and now watch this. So the tap tempo is adapting. So 205. So it's just counting the distance or the time rather between the click. So if I do this and click it again really slow. So if I want to keep a beat or something like that, it's a nice way to set the tempo on your R20. So that's a handy tip to know if you get stuck setting the tempo. And then for each of the tracks, you also have a choice of compressor, limiter, and gate. And for each of these, you can adjust things like the attack and release time, the threshold dB, and so forth. So it's kind of useful, too, that you could apply some compression to your drum tracks or other tracks as you might like. So very easy to use the track menus here. Again, panning and some of the other things like effects are always going to be found on that track menu, which is always found by clicking on that gray square and then clicking again on track settings. Now here's another feature that I didn't particularly read in the manual but discovered on my own just messing around. You can again not use the stylus. If I put my finger right where that line is at the edge of that gray bar, check out what happens. It'll expand this and then it allows me to mute per channel. So it's kind of nice because this way you can go in and mute tracks as you're playing through stuff. Okay, so the second icon that we can choose from, so again, this is your mute. The second is really what would be called a solo button on DAWs. So if I click this and it's indicated red, only track 6 will play during the mix when I hit play, versus this, which will mute track 6 and play all the other tracks that aren't muted. So as you might guess, you can only, or actually you can do solo. You can do it both ways. So you can mute multiple tracks, or you could solo multiple tracks and just have those playing. It's a little hard to see on our screen here, but I kid you not, these actually appearing here on the screen are red. It's a little hard to see on my iPhone, and these are, as I click them, appearing as yellow. So just keep that in mind for muting and soloing tracks. Now, one of the things you might want to do with your tracks is reorder them. So it's fairly easy to do that here. And what we can do is we have, for example, we could just play this here. Go to the beginning and hit play. So if I want this drum track to be up here on track 5 in my mix, all I have to do is hold it. Actually, in this case, I'm not going to hold, because what I'm doing here, I don't want to essentially just move the audio file, which we would do, as you know, normally this way. What I want to do, though, is I actually want to rearrange my track order. So if I want to move 6 up to here, I'll just pull like that, and lo and behold, it's now in track 5. So that's an easy way to remember things if you want to rearrange tracks and organize them. Unlike in a DAW where you could name tracks, the color coordination here doesn't allow you, for example, anywhere on this device to say that track 4 is a drum track. If it is a drum track, though, you might have another drum track here, and as a result, you could kind of keep those organized. Or if you're recording a band, and if after the fact it's easier to have, you know, tracks 1 through 5 be the rhythm section, you could rearrange the final wave files that you created from your recording through arming of the tracks and have those all in one section. So reordering the tracks is very easy to do just by going to the gray bar, as we know, to select the track and then just move it where you like. And you can see as you do it every time, the color changes because that's again coordinated with the colors that are on the mixers, the faders, and also our gain knobs. So let's just play something right now. Again, we're using the template. You're going to get an immediate sense of both the click track and also, and I'll take the click track off as it's playing, you're also going to hear the preset drum track here that it created. I think we made a disco template. So let's hit play. Now this is actually good, it's happening, so you're not hearing, you're just hearing the click track. You're not actually hearing the drums, and the reason for that is I have it the level all the way to 0. So let's bring it in. Take off the click track. So you're hearing some fills there. You're hearing some varied percussion. And let's let you hear some of that. And at this point, another thing that's useful to note is you're going to pinch. And so you're going to either to expand things pinch out or pinch in. So if I stop it, I can do this, and as you're seeing here, all of a sudden I can see the entirety of the project that goes through. How many bars do we have? Is it 17 bars? It looks like. So not unlike the features on Logic, and I'm referring to Logic because it's the DAW that I use, but you know in Logic in the top right hand corner you can expand either vertically. So if you want to see more detail vertically, you can do so. You can also expand horizontally and compress both vertically and horizontally. So it gives you more control over the entirety of your song. So if you have 20 tracks, you can easily shrink things down vertically and also horizontally and thus see everything as it's happening. So you can certainly do some of that here. It's not as full-fledged, but I do like the fact that they have these behaviors. And the response of the screen so far, as I'm saying that, it's a little bit slow here, but I think what happened is I accidentally clicked the track 8 and it's asking me if I want to add an audio file. I don't want to do that. But that's actually nice that you can go in and get down to a more granular level and see things again. Hopefully you're making out on our camera here some of the transients, so if there's a fill playing, you're seeing that there. And so that replicates really what you see in terms of waveforms, say, on your digital audio workstation. Now let me just, for the heck of it, click our drum track. This is actually good to see. So because they're merged as a stereo link, tracks 5 and 6 then are combined. So you don't have a choice for 5 and 6. If I took that stereo option off, then I would be able to do that. It's not even giving me that option under track settings because it's done this preset drum beat. And presumably, I don't know if that file is already loaded inside of this unit. It's probably creating it in a little bit different way than, say, Logic Pro when you go in and create your drummer track, as it's called. So that kind of shows you what is possible here with a template. The other thing that is worth showing, and again, if I had just my stylus, what I'm showing you with pinching and pushing my fingers out, I could not do with the stylus. So what I typically do, even using my Hector, there are some features there in the Hector where I want to create an output and an input, or I want to do an input and the module I'm playing with, or the module I'm playing with and the output. I need two fingers to do that. So what I typically do on the Hector is I'll press this down on either the input or the output, and my other finger on the module, or vice versa. So what I would probably do here is I would just keep my stylus in my hand and do this, because I really do like using the stylus. So this is kind of cool. I can click this. Now, if you're thinking, I could double click, and that would allow me, just like in Logic, to go in and edit things and do MIDI adjustments and all that fancy stuff. You can't do that here. So again, don't think of this editing here as you would a DAW. It's not even close to anything in Logic Pro, but again, it shouldn't be. Why would you want your entire DAW here in the R20? You know, they're different purposes, and that's really what I'm trying to stress in doing this video. So this is kind of cool here though. So at this point we could do things like split a track. If we hit split here, I'll just show you what happens. So let's try split. And yeah, so it puts a split there. So it's kind of nice. I mean, if you want to go in and customize some things, you can do that. By the way, if you're wondering, how does transport control here? You know, how does it work here? On Logic Pro, a lot of what you're doing, you could do on a trackpad or a mouse. You could do a lot of really fine level, granular adjustment of things by putting your mouse cursor, your transport head, at a point where you want to do something, whatever that happens to be. You don't have that level of control here, but it's fairly decent. So based on the time signature you have set up here, the fast forward and rewind button really serve this purpose. So if I click this, you're seeing every subdivision, it's clicking and going to that. So that's how I get my transport. So reverse and forward. So if I want something to happen there, it would be at that point. Let me see if I can drag. I was going to see if it, yeah, indeed you can. Okay, so it's not super easy to do, but if you don't want to have to keep clicking this to move your transport point, you'd have to get where it is currently and then drag. It's a little tricky. So this is what I was a little worried about, just because I'm struggling a little bit to, in a precise way, grab that. Let's see if the stylus helps. A little bit easier. What I probably want to do is this. If I really want to get to the end here, I'm going to do my action here, which again replicates some of the stuff we probably do on a trackpad or even a mouse. A lot of mice these days have the ability to do behaviors or movements on the top of the mouse, not unlike a trackpad. What I would do is I'm going to zoom out to max so I can see everything. Then let me grab it, the transport. Sorry about this, it's moving a little bit. And then I'm going to just drag it here. So that's probably the best bet. Again, I think you're beginning to see a little bit here that you're never going to replicate maybe what people might expect here on the DAW, on your digital audio workstation. So this, to continue just with what you can do with some of these audio files, since we have our drummer track here that's established here, preset by the R20, if I click on that portion of audio again, and again it's over I think it's 2 bars here in 4/4. If I click that, I have some options, so I could click again on that little spot there, and actually let me go back. I'll just hit the copy button. Okay, so you can see that's what's selected. So then what I would do is I'd click here, not unlike in your DAW where maybe you would add, say, a drummer track, or even you'd cut and paste right after wherever your transport header is here, you would click and then hit the paste button. And then you have a duplication there. And this is actually fast. We'll get into the MIDI operation and some struggles I've had with trying to copy and then paste the MIDI file. But this so far, look how fast that is. It's super fast. And actually, let's do it this way. We'll just continue to scroll and scroll here. So if I hit paste, you're going to see that's filling up, and that's quite a few bars. Now it's saying region is full. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about what I was struggling with there, I think when I was first demoing the R20, I didn't quite realize what regions were. So to go over this, if you look at the manual, the region is the data from a recording. So it could be something related to your WAV files that you bring in, it could be a standard MIDI file, or even one of those rhythm tracks. So kind of a region is what's defined as a section in any of your tracks for the R20. And this in the manual also confirms that. So audio and rhythm regions are shown as waveforms. So any of these, while synthesizer regions are shown as notes. And those would be examples up here of the synthesizer notes, the MIDI notes. Now, there's a lot you can do. Some of this I go over in the video, so we can move things, we can add, we can delete, we could divide or split things. So some of that certainly you could find out on your own. I think there's a lot of good detail in the manual that goes over this. The thing that I was encountering in my error just before this segment of the video was this limitation on the number of regions. So I think, as I will mention, that's one concern that you might have about working with this particular unit, whether it's your synth regions or maybe more importantly the audio and rhythm regions. You do have limitations. In the case of audio and rhythm 50, I don't think the synth regions are probably as big of a deal. So that's something definitely to think about. Now, of course, if you're recording your band or whatever and you record one track, that, as far as I know, will count as one region. It's just when you start bringing in these small audio clips or those rhythm tracks from the drummer feature that those start to add up and definitely could hit your limit in terms of having 50 of those total. So again, to go back to our original area where we were working with, we clicked on the gear icon, we clicked on projects, and then we just chose one of these. I'm not entirely sure, like if I click, let's try another one. Let's create a new one of these that is percussion only, and we can put on the headphones and play that. Again, will you be using these rhythms or not? I don't know, but they're not terrible for preset rhythms, right? So we'll put on the headset here, the headphones, and it looks to me like it's just creating those drum tracks. So let's turn off click and start it going. And let me go back to the project setting menu, and then I'll click on, I don't know if I want any more of these projects. So let me just, instead of, or these templates, let me just click on a blank project. I could again load a previous one I have been working on or an entirely new project. Now, at this point, you do have some additional options here for your projects. You can rename, duplicate, get information about it, export to a USB memory disk. Which, by the way, if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you have a USB drive that's type C. That is the only USB on here. It's a type C. So you'll have to think about that, get an adapter or work around that. Maybe they make type C USB drives. I'm not too worried about that. Again, I got two 512 gigabyte cards, so that's going to probably be enough for me here. So those are project options. You can also import a project at this point. Either from, I believe, the flash or the USB, or perhaps just the USB. I haven't tried to do that since I haven't saved any projects. But that way, if you have a lot of projects and you want to keep those on your computer where you have more storage, you don't have to eat up space here or on a USB drive or an SD card. So that is kind of a nice feature. You can also do projects by alphabetical or by the creation. So it'll have, I believe, the newest here and the oldest as you scroll here. And I think as you go along, it'll continue to add these. So I can hit new project and just hit create. And that's going to be my blank slate project. Again, you're seeing here, and we'll take this opportunity right now to go through some of the features here, including the controls on the screen, which are pretty important to understand. Now, there's one other setting you might look at, and that is the project options. And as you can see here, there are options here in your projects to rename, duplicate. You can choose the information, you can export it. So there is some additional information to be found there. Again, this is on the project menu. Again, as we talked about earlier, as you scroll down, you're going to see all your tracks. At some point, if you want to add an audio file, We'll get into this later, but it doesn't hurt to just say go to track 2 and click add audio file. So what I'm going to do is go back and load one of my previous projects. This unit is very particular about the bit setting and the kilohertz of your wave files. So 44.1 is a must, and then either 16 or 24 bits. I'm doing a share screen here because I want to show you this as it's happening. So one of the important things to note here, and I'm getting a warning here, I don't have an SD card, so I will put it back in there. But as you can see, you have your project files here that could include any of those created drum tracks. The most important folder, though, is in all caps your audio folder. And that is going to contain both your MIDI files, even though it doesn't say MIDI, it says audio. You need to put your MIDI files in there. It doesn't say that in the manual. So I'm going to put in these beats here. These are mono beats. And then I also have these test guitar files, test piano files, and somewhere I think I have a test drum as well. I'm just trying to remember because I renamed these because they were not the right bit rate. So I think those are the ones I'm thinking of. And then somewhere here I had a MIDI file. Put that MIDI file in there. Okay, so that's where you're going to put any of your wave or MIDI files. So it only takes waves, it doesn't do AIFFs. But now, as I eject this, it should be good to go because it should allow me to bring in a couple of audio files if I want, as well as those MIDI files, although the MIDI implementation, well, I'll get into that later. I keep griping about it, but you'll see why. So to do that, we're going to click, just like the MIDI track, add audio file. And then I'll click from my SD card, and lo and behold, they actually do appear here. And I can click test guitar. I can't click test guitar because that's a stereo audio file, so it was good to see that error. So I'll instead click my test 1, which is a mono track. It'll ask you if you want to rename it at this point. You could type that in and rename it. And then you'll see, you have to hit close there. You'll see it has that sound available. Hit play here and you can hear it playing. That's just where I had my transport, so that's why it's playing it there. So, and that's how you add an audio track. And just like we saw before with our drum tracks, as you zoom in and zoom out, you can get greater or less levels of granularity to be able to see maybe the transients and so forth. Again, you can't do a lot of sophisticated stuff. Okay, so now let's just go back to our new project. Or sorry, we'll pick this one because it essentially is a new project. Now I think it's going to let me turn off my click, import an audio file. So to do this, you'll click on any empty track. Now, if you've already defined a track as something, for example, if I turn this into a keyboard track, it wouldn't allow me to add audio here. I could add a MIDI file, so let me show you how to do that. We're going to just click on SD card, and I could play the MIDI file. You'll hear that playing. And if I like that, hit the plus button. Okay, and now I have my MIDI track. Now, this is the part where I think the implementation is a little bit questionable, just because you'll see it's very limited. Now, one thing that I'm really struggling with these MIDI tracks is, unlike the audio track, if I select this, it has the same format as we saw at the audio, and I could hit this and hit copy. Okay, great. Now, if I want to paste here, okay, I'm pasting it. Do you see what happened there? So the weird thing is, it pasted it. Let's go to the beginning. By the way, anytime using your transport control, if your transport is here and you want to go to the beginning, as long as it's stopped, a second click of the stop button will take you all the way to the beginning. So it goes there. But check out what happens when I hit play. We hear our electric piano, and now we don't hear it. So that's the only thing. So the only way that I see currently with this firmware, maybe it's an issue they'll address, is if I wanted more than one of my MIDI files here, I'd have to add each of them using that feature. So add standard MIDI file, SMF. And by the way, just make sure your MIDI files are in that format. They should be. If you do the Logic Pro export in MIDI, that's what you get. So I click back on this, I click add again, and then it's there. So every time I would potentially have to do that. And you know, it just the copy feature should copy the MIDI notes, and then just like we did with audio, paste it in, scroll out, and we could have our one MIDI file, you know, that many times, however many times we want it over all those. Now I did want to mention that you do, interestingly enough, for as limited as the MIDI is on here and the keyboard feature is, you can add a MIDI file. We can actually go in by clicking R. Hopefully you just saw that there. I click the scissors indicator, which is always your edit button, say in your audio tracks, and you click that, and you actually have, strangely enough, you know, for this level of what you get with the sounds and the MIDI capabilities, a fairly decent editor. You can adjust the length of notes, you can adjust the velocity of notes, and you can go in and actually, it's going to be impossible here because we have so many notes, but I think what I could do is, let's see here, I can delete notes. Hopefully you're seeing that. Let's zoom in some more here. This is actually orange. Now we got our orange, got our zoom in. So if you check this out, it's kind of actually fairly advanced for the R20 because again, the sounds are so limited. Again, why would you do that here instead of editing your SMF file on your DAW or on another program? But it is an option. You can go in and adjust the length of notes, and you can also adjust the velocity, which is kind of impressive for this. Now to go in and do this on a per note basis, every single note to do a velocity adjustment for, you know, it's like, do I really want to spend my time doing that? So again, there are some options here, but given the limitations of the MIDI and the sounds that you're hearing, I don't know if you'd be using these extensively here in terms of doing note editing or velocity editing with your MIDI tracks. So throughout this demo, I think you'll get a good sense of the physical layout of the mixer. It's fairly straightforward. Again, we've gone over the back panel, the side panel, not a lot going on there. You have all your faders here, so you have your 8 faders and your master fader. As you've learned throughout this demo, each of these is color coordinated. So the orange here and on the fader and the orange on the gain adjustment knob matches the orange on the track. So that kind of level of connection with colors, I think, is one of the best designs of this mixer. Again, we've talked a little bit about the faders. You have your transport control here. Very ergonomic, easy to use. These buttons are fairly decent. Again, I think the screen is pretty easy to use in terms of the touchscreen options. You have your high Z for channel 1 if you have a bass or a guitar. We know about how to switch between our various channels to go from 1 through 8 to go through 9 through 16. You simply click that button there on the touch screen. If you want your phantom power and power your condenser microphones, you would go ahead and press these. They work in 2 sets. So if you press this to on, 5 and 6 will be powered with 48 volts. If you press 7 and 8, this 7 and 8 will be powered with 48 volts. Obviously, if you don't have phantom powered equipment, you don't necessarily want these on. There could be damage done. So there isn't a safety switch to this. So I would just recommend that you maybe keep track of these so as to not damage any equipment that doesn't require phantom power. Again, to arm tracks, very easy to do. Any of these that we press will now record, and then once we hit record, you'll see that all of our tracks are being recorded each in their individual color. And again, this is probably the true strength of this mixer multi-track recorder, the fact that we have this color coordination between the physical side of the unit and the more software side of the unit. If I hit stop, these are all blank, nothing's going into the input, but you could see that we have all our tracks recorded using those color combinations that we have established here on the physical side of the mixer. And again, you have all your inputs up here, the combination of 1/4 inch and XLR, the remaining ones all XLR with only 5 through 8 being phantom power optional compatible, and then 3 and 4 are not. So it's definitely something to think about if you're recording your own band as they show in the demo on Zoom's website. Definitely think about any limitations here, but certainly for a small combo, a smaller band, I think this probably will be enough to do some live recording of your band as a rehearsing or performing. Getting a sense here of the scrolling again, I think it's pretty good. I think the response here maybe on this screen is a little better than my Poly Hector. Again, I'm always using a Stylus. I recommend one of these, and I can share the one I bought on Amazon, although you're probably competent enough to find, 100 different versions of these on Amazon. But in any case, reach out if you'd like that information. So those are MIDI files. So again, once I've defined that track as something, I can't go in and do something that's not possible on that track. So I can't add an audio file. It won't even allow me to do that. Now, another thing that's, I think, kind of a key in looking at just this touchscreen here is getting a sense of everything that is available and how you might use this. So once you kind of understand these, just like you would in your digital audio workstation, you have a better ability to kind of work with this in an ergonomic way. Again, you'll differentiate between 3 types of tracks. So you have that MIDI track or the keyboard track. By the way, if you ever want to customize or go in and change it, you would simply click here. You can, by the way, export that or convert that to audio. So that's kind of like in Logic, that feature where you'll have a very long MIDI section and your VST or virtual synth is playing, and you click on there, I believe, with the double click or 2-finger mouse click, and you go in and you render that file, and then it converts it to an audio file with all of the effects and everything that you have set up for that particular MIDI track or virtual synth. So convert to audio is going to be very similar to that, I believe. I haven't tried it yet. By the way, Phantom Power, if you're wondering, on here is available on 4 tracks, 5 through 8 or 13 through 16, using what we'll go with here, which is that feature. And you just saw it here. So I'm clicking here. Notice the set of tracks will change. You have a red LED for 1 through 8. If I click that icon, then it goes 9 through 16. So what that means is if I have a synthesizer plugged in channels 1 and 2 here, and this is a combination XLR and quarter inch, so you could use it for either. Channel 1 also has your high Z. We could experiment with this later. So if I have a guitar or bass, I could plug it into channel 1 and get a boost there. The rest are all XLR, but as you can see, we choose from 1 and 8 and 9 and 16 using this icon right there, and that's very easy to use. And they probably could have put a button here, but it's easy to remember, and I think you just click that. The minute you're on these additional 8 tracks, you go to those, and that way you get the full 16 tracks. Again, if you had a 16-track mixer, if you did a bigger version of this, maybe if it was twice the size, right, you could record an even bigger band simultaneously, because obviously you can only record 8 inputs at a time. If you're going to use 9 through 16, those would have to be overdubs, which is fine depending on the setting. But if you want something to record an entire band, then get a bigger mixer like the QU16 back here, and then record all those inputs if you need more than 8 individual inputs. So that kind of shows how you can go between tracks 1 and 8 and 9 and 16. And again, high Z is here. This is your gain adjustment for every channel, very easy to use. And then you also have your Phantom Power. So if your microphones, like this one, my blue microphone, they're always XLR. If you need that extra boost to run the Phantom Power, to power the mic, you just click those switches on, and then all those channels will be enabled. So you have these 2 channels, you would get both 5 and 6 or 13 and 14. These you would get 7 and 8 or 15 and 16. So if you were recording a live band, you would potentially have to think about this issue, or have an external way to power with your Phantom Power your microphones that might need that juice. So something else to think about, again, if you're doing different applications talking about this, you may have different challenges with this mixer / multi-track recorder. So I think at this point, just talking about the main controls on the touch screen, and again, I really wish I could do, I'm going to zoom in here. The thing you're not seeing is the colors. Everything is getting washed out with a white. Actually, it's getting better as I zoom in, so maybe that's the key. I just have to zoom in really close. Let me just adjust this a little bit for you. Apologies for this, but this is just the challenge of trying to record a demo like this and to get everything to work perfectly. So if I zoom out, I lose. What I'm going to do is just zoom in close, and then I'll move my tripod to go along here. So hopefully I can get this to work. There we go. It's a little skewed there. So what you're seeing here is the main parameters for this screen that you're going to be interacting with. So your 3 types of track are listed here. That's an audio track. This is your percussion track, or what they call drummer track. And then this is your MIDI track, which could be either MIDI that you play in using a keyboard and all of 19 sounds, or you could bring in a standard MIDI file, SMF, and then have that playing on that particular track. By the way, you can only have one MIDI track at a time. And so, there are limitations here in using all the parameters of this R20. This is your tempo here, actually your bar indicator, where it is relative to your transport. So if I move that, you see that the bar, it's a little hard to read here, that changes. And then this is your tempo, which you can click on, and your time signature, only 3 choices of time signature, 3, 4, 4, 4, and 6/8, a little limited there. This is your library button, so anytime you click that, the effects will pop up. That would typically be used for your insert effect. This is your edit button, which can be used in a lot of different aspects of working with your audio files and also rhythm files. This is an undo button here. Let's move our tripod. Come on, stay in focus. This is our undo button. So I did an undo, and as you can see there, I lost my audio tracks I just recorded. If I hit that again, it'll put them back. So you have, I think, one level undo and redo, if you will. Again, this is our button to change from channels 1 through 8 and 9 through 16. This is our mixer view. If you click on this, you can go in and adjust your mixing parameters. So kind of handy to know that, and that's similar to what you see on the DAW. This is where you set your markers. You can set a variety of markers. You can rename them, and you can also move between the markers. So now we have, if I move my camera, sorry about that, you have an intro marker there. And then lastly, we have the important gear icon. So that's going to be for different settings depending on what you're doing in your current project that you're working on the R20. So that is an overview of the main screen, the touch screen that you'll be using, and it's very easy, I think, to learn all these because they are very iconographic. You kind of know based on the icon what you're getting into, and therefore you can go in and do the work that you need to do. This particular icon here is what they call your library icon. It is very specific to the type of track. So for an audio track, the effect will pull up. Let's click on our MIDI keyboard track. If I click that, I believe the type of synth will come up, and then this is the place where you could try it out. So I could click on the mellow electric piano, click the keyboard icon. Since I don't have my cord yet to do this via MIDI, now I could play on the keyboard. And I know you're immediately blown away at the power. You're like, that is the most authentic Fender Rhodes I've ever heard. No, not really, right? So yeah, these sounds, I thought they were going to be general MIDI. In some respects, I think they're a little lower than general MIDI. So you have a whopping 18, and you can choose between types of organs: a pipe organ, a finger bass, a pick bass, a slot bass. We'll go through these all later in their full glory. The brass are not to be messed with. Actually, I think the brass on my old Casio SK1 were a little better than this. And if you had an SK1, you know that that synth was not known for its brass sounds. Try playing Touch and Go, Emerson, Lake, and Palmer's song on here, right? So, yeah, anyway, so it has 19 total, including a drum kit. And the drum kit is probably the best sounding of these. I can't hear what's playing, but no doubt you're hearing it. So yeah, anytime you click on that, I mean, the way that they've set this up in terms of both the physical layout, the ergonomics of that, the transport here, the icons here, I think it works really well. So I don't have any complaints about kind of how they did this. And I spent about, again, an hour learning this earlier today before I shot this video. And I was thinking to myself, this is not bad. I mean, it's fairly easy to use, and all these make sense. Okay, so we can actually take a look, as dangerous as it will be, let's take a look at the synth sounds available here on the R20. As I've said throughout this video, I won't keep saying it, I'm not a big fan of the synth sounds, the MIDI feature. I just don't think you would necessarily use these, but let me just show you what you're getting into. So we would choose this, which is our MIDI or synth option. And then, as we always do, we'll, for anything that involves a choice of a sound, choice of rhythm type for rhythm track, choice of an audio effect for various tracks, you'll click on your library icon right there. And we'll just play through each one of these. And I think if I hit this, it changes the octave. And it'll tell you here it's C5 versus C4. Okay, and then it looks like if you hit that back button, it'll go back to the selection. So this is bright electric piano. Mellow electric piano. because you can't just have bright, you need a mellow one too. Interesting. Here's our bell sound. FM bell, sort of, I guess. Definitely not competing with the DX7. Here's an organ sound. I do not have my adapter yet for using the MIDI keyboard. When I get that, I'll probably show you that in video 2 that I'm going to be doing. That is organ 2. I don't know why you need so many organ sounds. Here's pipe organ. Let's see if we can do. And I'm assuming it's not polyphonic, right? Let's try to play 2 notes. I'm going to be shocked here. I put my headphones on. It is polyphonic. Wow. Okay, so let's see. Sorry about that butchering toccata and fugue in D minor. Yeah, so you know what? You have a polyphonic synthesizer here in the R20. Okay, I know I'm totally being a smartass about this, but the sounds are just nothing to write home about. Here's our finger bass. Literally, oh my god, that is so hilarious. Literally, look, we have a finger bass. Get it? Finger bass. It's freaking hilarious. Okay, maybe not. Finger bass 2. I'm so glad they put in the second finger bass because I need a second finger bass when I am doing multi-track recording. So there you see that one. I literally am going to go through all of these so you can skip ahead. Here's a pick bass. I don't know why so many bass sounds. Slap bass. Acoustic bass. They love basses. Okay, I'm just giving you the character of the sound. You probably already have fast forwarded. So I'm just talking to myself now. Still thinking about that amazing performance of toccata and fugue in D minor. Okay, synth bass 2. Brass 1. Have your hand at playing touch and go. Brass 2. Brass 3. Yes, we're almost done. Synth lead. I gotta hear this. I'm gonna put the headphones on because this is gonna be the most amazing synth lead ever. All right. Okay, that's your synth lead. Drum kit. All right, last one. And if you're wondering, you currently in this firmware can't, if I hit record, as you see here, let's see. Let me try this. Track 1. Will it let me, no MIDI keyboard. Okay, so it says here, activate the MIDI keyboard setting and connect MIDI keyboard. So unfortunately you can't use, or maybe I should say fortunately, because what could you really play on that little capacitive keyboard here on the screen, but you do need the MIDI keyboard to actually record in any MIDI tracks. And I promise I'll stop talking about this, but you know, again, for me this feature is very strange because if I have a studio in front of me with all sorts of synthesizers, I have my VSTs, I have maybe external keyboards, I have a Prophet, whatever, you know, that I can play and record directly in here. Why would I choose to use the built-in sounds when they sound so bad? So that's my one like real consternation about this particular unit is why the heck did they even have that feature? Because it's not going to be useful for anyone. It's not like the kind of sounds in the old days. I had an old Korg. What was the name of that? It was actually about this size. It didn't have a keyboard on it. It just had pads, and it was an arranger. You could actually do drum beats and synth sounds and effects, and I found it hard to work with, but you had some really good sounds, and you could do complex stuff in terms of rhythms and playing and quantizing, etc. So this is a very strange feature in terms of having the MIDI option and also the option for connecting an external keyboard. And you might say, well, what if you want to bring in a MIDI file and play an external synth and bring it in here? Well, you could just do that with your own MIDI file. You could record it onto here, but you can't have, there isn't a MIDI out on here, so it's not like with an RC505, you could do some stuff syncing your in and out of your MIDI, controlling external gear. So that's why I keep saying in this video, this is not by any means a looper. Don't think of this as a looper, because most of your loopers allow you to do MIDI in, out, and often through, which allows for synchronization of external gear. So that's it. If you want to use the internal sounds, the internal MIDI option, you have that option here. This will allow you to go in and add markers. So just like you could in Logic, say with a text header marker, or in Final Cut Pro, you could add one there, and then you could call it something. Now let's try this. This could actually be interesting to be able to visually lay out, say, your intro, your verse, and your chorus on a song. So if we add one here, oh, it automatically calls it verse. Oh, I can change that. Okay, that's nice. Okay, so I can call that section 2. Not terrible typing these, except I can't see what I'm doing. That's not, anyway, well, pretend that says section, hit done, close. And yeah, so that's kind of cool. So I could set up my markers here. Again, it looks like a little flag, so it's easy to remember. And then when I'm clicking on it, it will let me go, I think, scroll through each of these. Or maybe actually, no, it's allowing me, that's kind of cool. It's allowing me to move it. So it's moving it, I guess, 1 bar every time is that? I'm not sure what the subdivision is. But that allows me to go in and change it, and then I can also delete, and you can see it's now gone, and I just have my first one, which is my intro. So again, I could add as many of those that I might want. We already dealt with this icon, which is our settings, and you're familiar with that. It depends on the screen that we're on. This is your mixer view. So this kind of is very similar, again, to a digital audio workstation in the sense that you might be actually wanting to switch between track view and mixer view. So you could go in and adjust things here. Haven't had a chance to mess with this. It looks like I can adjust the levels. And by the way, see that we're getting like perfect coordination, as you'd expect, between our faders here, the physical, and then the virtual versions here. So certainly what they've done here with the GUI, with the graphic interface, the software, I think is very good, and it's nice to work with. I don't have a lot of complaints thus far. If you want to do a mix down, you would click that button, I believe, and we're not going to mess with that now, but that would go through the process of creating, I think, a stereo file. We'll have to see what happens with multi-tracks and how we're going to work with those, because my plan is to record this again from my micro setup and then take the audio files and do post-production here, because I feel like I have more control. And that's the other thing I would recommend is, as you're going to see in some of the music samples we'll be working with, like if I have my micro granny or some of my other synths here and I'm recording a particular piece, I could have all those tracks committed here to my SD card, then bring those into the computer, as I'm doing currently when I record all my Eurorack stuff. I do this in my QU16. So I'm hoping this will be an easier opportunity for me to work with some of my small synthesizers and record them in some of these pieces, and then do post-production work here inside of Logic as I edit the tracks. We're going to do the first of a variety of sound tests. Some of these will be on this part 1 video. Once I've spent a little more time with the unit over the next few weeks, I'll release a second video. It'll be much shorter, but you'll get an idea here doing a few sound tests as far as the capabilities of this, primarily as a multi-track recorder. This first test is going to focus on using this for podcasting or doing voiceovers. So as I mentioned to you earlier in the video, in the past I would often use my handheld recorder when I was outside of my home office and I didn't have my good mixing setup. My idea is, this is certainly smaller, but it's not going to produce a lot of quality as compared to recording with one of my good XLR microphones. So my plan is to hopefully use this in my office setting whenever I'm doing a video and I need a voiceover. I can basically just have this set up, bring in an XLR cable, bring in a good microphone, and the mic that you'll see here is my blue microphone that I use for all my voiceovers. I'm going to try that one out, and I'm just running it then directly into channel 5. Keep in mind I need to use 5 through 8 because these are the only two that are phantom powered, and I want to make sure I have this turned on. If I don't, by the way, you won't get any response from the microphone if it's a condenser or other microphone that needs phantom power. So I do have that on. Right now I have the gain at 0. I was monitoring it and it seems like it'll be okay. So what we're going to do is record to track 5. To do the recording, I simply enable, and again, with the red light here on track 1, we know that 1 through 8 are armed. If I wanted 9 through 16, I could change that there. What we'll do is I'll record a simple voiceover, and then you'll be able to watch it here, monitor it as it's being recorded. You're also going to hear the microphone live, as usual, coming out of my 2 1/4-inch outputs into my other mixer. The microphone you're hearing right now, as I'm speaking, is recorded into my Allen & Heath. So you'll have to wait for this next demo to hear the recording of my other blue microphone into the R20. So we'll start that now, and at the end of this we'll take a look at the files that come out and some of the options for rendering and exporting. And of course, I totally forgot, I have it on track 5, and you can see it's red there, so it's armed and ready to go. I'm going to hit record and start my voiceover. And I'll turn off the click. Doing a test here with the microphone to see if we're getting a good level. Okay, so I'm thinking, I don't see anything that was recorded. So maybe I have to adjust my gain. Let's go back and see if this even worked. Remember, you can always hit stop twice. And I'll turn off the click. Yeah, it's on there. Doing a test here with the microphone to see if we're getting a good level. Okay, let's try one other thing. Maybe let's peak the gain. Let's boost it a little bit. Let me just try this in my microphone. Testing the gain here, testing the gain. There's more presence. So I'm just going to put it at 50%. Again, I don't know. This is a brand new mixer recorder, so I'm going to delete that first version. It's very easy to do, and again, I can just go back to the beginning. So it's already armed. Let's go ahead and hit record, and I'll do a sample voiceover now with the adjustment of my gain at about 50%. So let's try that now. Okay, so the recording has started, and I'm doing a test voiceover now here with the Zoom R20. We might, in particular, think about the quality of this. We think about the ease of use. For me, again, if I'm doing voiceovers outside of my home office, I am very much interested in convenience. I want something that's portable. In this case, I do have to plug in the R20, but just with a simple microphone cable and one of my better mics, and a boom stand, things are starting to add up here to my list of what I need to bring along. I'm hopeful that this better audio quality will be worth the trouble and the price of the Zoom R20. So let's stop the recording now, and then we're going to look at some of the options with the audio file. Okay, so again, you're hearing the live out of my other microphone. You're back on my second microphone here. Let's go ahead and start at the beginning. Let's hit play. Again, I'm not seeing any transients on here. It's kind of interesting. I'm wondering why I'm not seeing that. So let's go back to the beginning, hit play. This is the direct out. Okay, so the recording has started, and I'm doing a test voiceover now here with the Zoom R20. We might, in particular, think about the quality of this. We think about the ease of use. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. It sounds like it did record it. I'm just wondering why we're not seeing... Oh, actually we are. They're really faint. I don't know. We probably can't make that out, but I was getting little teeny transients down here. It's too hard for this camera to make out. So let's try something now. We're going to look at bringing the SD card into the computer and see what the file looks like, and then we can look at some options related to this direct project and making sure that we are able to export it in the way that we want. Okay, so right now what we're going to do is we'll just take the memory card directly out of the R20. Let's put it in the computer, and the reason for doing this is I really want to take a look at the format of the audio file that is going to pop up for us to edit. So we'll just take a look here. Again, I haven't really dived into this yet. And fortunately, it looks like, so we were talking about how the audio file is going to contain your MIDI files and also your various audio tracks you want to bring in. These are all my projects, and they're in sequential order by time and date. So this 14 will be the most current one. And I'm going to turn up the volume here to make sure we can hear things. You see there's more information online about the file structure that you're going to find inside of your file. So you'll find this data file which has information very small, a couple K, a few bytes, and then you have this particular file which is maybe your project information file, and then this is going to be the one that is, I think, your main file. And the way this format seems to be is it's REC and then the track number. So I recorded that voiceover on track 5, you'll recall, so there's a 5 in front of there. I'm not sure why there's a 2 versus a 1 on this, but let's go ahead and play this file. I want something that's portable. In this case, I do have to plug in the R20, but just with a simple microphone. Okay, so far that's very similar to the type of file I would take off my Tascam handheld audio recorder and bring into Audacity. I really recommend the open source free Audacity to do any of your gain adjustments you might need. I do this with my Allen and Heath all the time because sometimes it's a little low on the recording. This is about what my Allen and Heath records at. You can kind of see the waveform there, and I'm going to just go in and do an amplify. And I've just discovered that if I go about 5 or 4 under what the computer recommends, I get in about the right range. Sometimes there's a peak here, and you can deal with that in post-production. Let's see if this is better. Interested in convenience. I want something that's portable. In this case, I do have to plug in the R20, but just with a simple microphone cable and one of my better mics and a boom stand, things are starting to add up here to my... Okay, so I think that's pretty good. So if I like that, I'm just going to save that as something. I'll just call that narration, and then I'll have that file available. So the good news here is I'm really happy to see that I can just take this WAV file directly. We'll test this later with my musical tracks, but I'm hoping if I record 4 tracks, I'll get REC 1 through 4, and I can take those raw files, run them to Audacity, and then I can go back, say, into Logic and do some customization of the panning and stuff. I personally don't like doing a lot of mix down in, even if the recorders have recording settings like my 2 mixers do now. I like doing everything in post-production just as a matter of control, but it's totally up to you. So let's do this now. Let's eject our card, and we're going to remember that was our last project. And what we're going to do now is go back over to the R20 and see exactly what the export options are as well. Okay, good. So now we're back here with our file, and I believe, let's just go ahead. I think this is the correct track. So let's go back to the beginning by hitting stop twice, and let's hit play. Okay, so the recording has started, and yep, indeed. Okay, so we know that that's our same project. It looks like it just defaulted to the project we're working on, the most current one, so that's definitely good news. So now what I want to encourage you to do is think about some options for mixdown. Now, in my recollection, and bear with me here, I'm learning this along with you, I believe if we click on any audio track, and again, this is on track 5, it will give us, I believe, an option for export. Yeah, okay, so it wasn't, I first clicked on this. Remember, if you click on any audio, rhythm, MIDI region, these options will come up. You're not going to find the export option here. So instead of that, we're going to click on our gray box. Remember, that always pulls up our track settings. And then we can go track settings, delete, or export. I want to choose the export and see exactly what my options are here. And I'm hoping this is similar to, I constantly go into Logic and will mix down a MIDI file to audio, or I just simply export an audio track without doing the share song feature because it's just a lot quicker. I'm hoping this will be that same functionality. Let's check it out. Now this is giving me a length option, number of bars, and it's saying currently excuse me, trying to peer in here, 32 bars. Let me just see, did we record up to 32 bars? Yeah, that is correct. Okay, so looking at this, you'll see the cursor's right around there. It's about ending at 29 or so. So maybe it's giving us a little wiggle room at the end. So let's go ahead and use their, I did the wrong thing again. Let's go ahead and use their suggested export length. If you made it shorter, like if you did it here with the increments only 10 bars, what would happen is it would cut off that narration. So let's go ahead and hit export on this and see what happens. And in this case, why don't we call it something else? Because we don't want to lose sight of what we're doing here. So we'll call it voice export. I blame this. This is not the keypad. It's my vision. Let's call it voice export 1. It's misspelled. We'll call it that. And let's see what it does. Okay, it's spinning a little bit here. Apologies, I have the camera zoomed out here so you can see everything. And we're also getting a sense of real time how long this is going to take. What we're going to do is we're going to do the 2 versions of export that I'm familiar with. We'll go back over to the computer and then see how those audio files might be different. In particular, we can go into Audacity and look at the bit. The bit factor. We can also look at the kilohertz to make sure everything is in the same general range of what we're expecting. Okay, exported the file to SD card, and it looks like it created a new folder, so we're also going to check that out. Okay, good. So I think we're satisfied with that first export. So there's a second option. You're going to find that by going to your mixer icon. It's the third icon from the right after the gear, the marker icon, and it's the next one over right before the 1 through 8, 9 through 16 icon. So we'll click that. This we're familiar with is our mixer view that we've looked at a couple times in this video. So let's just click this mix down button. Again, I haven't done this. We're going to try it. I don't know what features would be an option here. If I could do an insert effect at this point, an insert effect would have to be during recording. I wonder if I did a send effect. Let's just go back real quick for my sake and click that to go back. Let's check track 5, and you remember to get to our effects for this track, we'll click on our library icon. Looks like a little drawer. Okay, it says effect is in use on send. So I don't want to crunch on there, so I was just going to throw a little bit of reverb, I think. Something that's maybe more standard. Scroll down here. Actually, for the heck of it, I'm just going to do vocal double. See if it'll let me do that. Again, you can go in and adjust your effects if you needed to. We won't bother with that. Now let's go back. I think if I've done this correctly, I should check my send levels. You'll remember that is found under track settings right here. And it looks like it should have that vocal double in there, correct? It was saying the track is in use with another track. So perhaps let's try that again and see if it'll let me do that. Yeah, vocal double. Now let me put the send level around 50%. So my concept here is if this will come in the mixdown track, then we'll hear some effect and we can kind of just make some judgments about what it's done. So let's go back to our mixer icon. And again, you're going to click this icon here. It's called mix down. It's actually, this icon is right in between the 1 through 8 on this menu screen and the grayed out icon of scissors for edit. So let's just click mix down. Okay, I just discovered something. It's worth reading the manual. So on page 122, you have to do one other operation here. So indeed, correctly, I hit mix down. We have to hit the record button. Once I hit the record button, then it'll start our mix down. And you're seeing, I think you're seeing some movement there. Yes, so it's
I'm doing a test voiceover
going
now
through
with the Zoom R20.
Now check this out.
We might, in particular, think about the quality of this. We think about the ease.
Okay, and I'm doing that because
Voiceovers outside of my home office.
you're going to hear. Let's remember, about 20 seconds in, when we play the audio file, what'll happen is if I adjust the master here or any of the faders, it will actually change that, or should change that in our final mixdown. So once this is over, we're going to jump to the computer and hear the results.
Quality will be worth the trouble. and the price of the Zoom.
I don't offhand hear the
So let's
send
stop the
effect,
recording now,
so
and we'll look
I
at
could be
some
off
of
on
the
that, but I don't
options
hear
with
it.
the audio file.
Okay, and I could, I don't think it'll stop on its own, so I'll hit the stop button, and the mix down is done. So again, that was armed. I can unarm that. The other thing to think about in this, you probably recall this, but when we first set up our project, we had some project settings, and at that point we determined the bit depth, and also the kilohertz is always 44.1. So if you want to go between 16 and 24, 24 would be a little better quality, takes up more space. It's totally your call. I mean, 16-bit is really decent at 44.1, right? So, okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to shut off the machine, and we should have, I think, 2 files that are new. So we're going to check those out on the computer. Okay, here we're back on the computer. I just ejected the card. Now I'm essentially searching for my 2 files. So the first one, you recall, we had called, I'm forgetting what that was. Vox export. There it is. Okay, so that was our first export. So I'm going to bring all 3 of these to the desktop. So narration was the one we mixed down directly from the card, not using any of the export or mix down features. So let me bring Vox export 1. Okay, that is my file that I did clicking on the track and then choosing the export button after I clicked on the gray bar of track 5. Now the next one is, yep, this is the one because it's at 7:38. I'm checking my time here. This is the one that we just did using the mix down feature by going to the mixer icon. So let's check out all 3. We know what the narration track is going to be. Okay, that's that one. And we're going to open up 3 different windows because I want you to compare with me the bit depth and also the kilohertz. It should be the same, let's hope. That's our third one. I'm already seeing it did do that adjustment, you'll recall. So let's take our Vox export 1. Let's do our amplification just for the sake of, do it around 25 dBs. For the sake of comparison, okay. So I'm looking at the files and they are all the same. 44.1, it says 32-bit, 32-bit. I'm not sure if that's a convention with, I assumed it was going to be at 24-bit, but maybe I'm off on that. So in any case, let's just make sure. We'll go through these. This, you note, is a stereo file. Now, I don't really think that's necessary because in this case, I didn't do anything with panning, right? I just had a mono track coming from my one blue microphone here. So it's interesting. It's stereo, and it makes sense why it's stereo. But if you had a lot of panning going on that you had, let's say, set up with your track settings, then you would definitely want to think about having a stereo file. Okay, so we can compare the 3. Let's hit play and just see if we notice any difference. This is our first one. Okay, so the recording has started and I'm doing a test voiceover now here with the Zoom R20. Okay, here's our export track 1. Okay, so the recording has started and I'm doing a test voiceover now here with the Zoom R20. We might in particular think about the quality of this. We think about the ease of use. For me. Okay, so I'm not detecting, again, it's just my ear. I'm not detecting any noticeable difference. If we get the info, I'm curious, are the file sizes the same? They're not, interestingly enough. So they both are coming up as mono. Okay, this one is correctly coming up as 24 bits. This, I think, is incorrect. Maybe it's some default on Audacity. So the only difference I'm noting here is this is at 24 bits versus the original, which is off of the card. You recall it recorded directly in the channel, is saying that's 16-bit. And my curiosity about that is, you know, you'd think it'd be the same because once, according to the manual, you set up the bit depth, you can't change that. So this is a little bit of confusion, but that's going to explain the larger size. Look, 4.9, 8.9, about twice the size for higher bit depth. So who knows? Again, to my ear, those 2 sound very similar. Let's take our third one. And our third one, just out of curiosity, is a stereo file. It is twice the size of that. So it's 16.9 megabytes, and it's showing 24 bits, 44.1. So same as our second Vox export. Let's play this one. And in particular, you're going to notice, I believe around 20 seconds or so, I adjusted the fader. Let's see if it correctly did that. This looks loud, so we're going to turn down our volume. Okay, so the recording has started, and
It's peaking a little bit.
Voiceover now here with the Zoom R20. We might, in particular, think about the quality of this. We think about the ease.
Yep. The fader is right there.
Voiceovers outside of my home office.
Yep.
I'm very much interested in convenience. I want some.
Okay, cool. So, that's kind of cool. And that was very specific. Let me go back to our file page here. As it said here, doing that third option, the mix down, and then we hit the record button, level adjustments made with channel and master faders during mix down will affect the mix down recording. So that's pretty cool. So it reminds me of my old days using a Tascam, where I remember we were literally in real time mastering to a cassette tape, or if we had a DAT available, even a high quality VHS in stereo, we would master in time, and we all would have assignments on the Tascam of when to pan stuff, when to bring out levels, when to fade in and out. Kind of cool. So in a sense, that's replicating this. You could do that right on the mixer. Now, the one thing you're going to notice here that we didn't get was any sense that the send effect was on, because you recall I used that weird vocal doubler. And I don't hear anything at all.
Okay, so again, you're hearing the live out of my other microphone. You're back on my.
Oh, that's interesting. So you notice that tail is recorded on there too, but I think that might be just bleed from. No, yeah, that's on the original file. So that just bleed from my other microphone into the mixer. But the interesting thing is I don't detect that it did that send effect. So for video 2, I'm going to look into this a little bit more and get to the bottom of if you can do output effects. For me, it's not a big deal. Again, what I'm going to do is not use either of those two versions. I'm going to stick with my first version. I'm just going to pull it directly from the card. I'm going to check that out in the next audio demo that will involve music, just to make sure that that is possible. So that's it on this first audio demo. Let's go on and do another demo to check out some music applications. Okay, for our next experiment, let's get into some applications of electronic music, specifically Eurorack music. So what I'm going to do for this one is just very simply record 2 channels in from a unit that I just picked up recently, the Quantrated Swarm by EOWave. And this is a pretty complex oscillator that I have a sequence running through. And one of the things you're going to note is that I'm attenuating the signal. So there's a lot of variance between mixers in terms of input signal, and particularly with Eurorack gear, sometimes Eurorack gear has a much hotter decibel level coming into mixers. With my Allen & Heath, which is off screen, it's actually not the case, and very often I'll take a direct signal in from any number of my Eurorack modules, and if anything I have to boost the signal using Audacity, as I've been showing you today. In the case of the R20, I tried it out, and I'll show you specifically what I recorded. And the peak meters were coming on here. So when you set anything to record, of course, you're going to use the record arm buttons. And you can adjust the gain going up. You just can't lower your dBs or decibels if the signal's too hot. I'm just making sure on my fan of power and the high Z is off. Indeed it is. So let me just play this segment here, which I recorded without attenuation. What I'm going to do is actually leave in that was recorded direct, because again, I want to test things. We're going to take the output from channels 1 and 2, run into the computer, take a look at it as we did in Sound Demo 1, and I specifically want to see if this signal is too hot. Now, in my previous sound demo for the voiceover, you notice we didn't see the waveforms, we didn't really see the transients. In this case, we can see them, they're fairly pronounced. To me, I don't know the basis of the levels here. They don't look necessarily that they peaked, but these peak meters were going off, and I don't know if I can replicate that. Probably if I set the gain rather high and start the sequence. And by the way, if you start this and you don't hear anything, I want channels 1 and 2 to record. I'm going to again put the bar there to start my transport. When I hit record here, if at some point you see that peak meter, red flashing, then obviously you know that your signal could be too hot. Again, in this case, I can't necessarily turn down the module that I'm using. It doesn't have an output level. The best way to get around that in the world of Eurorack is to use off screen here what's called an attenuator. And that's just basically a fancy way of saying we put a signal in and we can control how hot that signal is. So the easy way around this, if you're doing Eurorack modular synthesis stuff and your signals are too hot for the R20, is you would just take your line in to your line out from whatever module or modules you're using into a VCA, voltage controlled amplifier. Of course, you can affect that to great degree using the CV input on that, but if you want to use it simply as a gain adjustment, or in this case a gain what's the word for it, a gain lower or something like that, then that is an option. Now the other thing you can do, reduction is the word I'm looking for, sorry, is you could get a module like this, which is ears, which is an envelope follower, but the other useful thing about this module is you can use it to attenuate signals. I typically use this in my electroacoustic work when I have a signal too low. I'll feed it in here and crank it a little bit, and it has a nice little meter on here. This is one of the most useful modules for the electroacoustic musician. So that certainly is also a possibility in terms of using different modules to lower signals that might be too hot for this mixer. Now it just really depends. So I also have a couple of line level instruments here, and if I turn these on, and by the way, I discovered, I'm using this adapter, but I discovered for my Eurorack I would need a stereo to mono converter. So I ordered a few of those, and it's one of the reasons I'm doing a more scaled down demo here, just doing 2 tracks, because I really want to get some of that additional equipment in to use the mixer here and do some additional demos for you in video 2. But right now I can turn on track 3. And keep in mind, you'll notice here it's very handy when I engage track 3 with the button, this turns red. So the white number of the track turns to red. So again, I really feel like a great strength of the R20 is real nice symmetry, coordination, integration, whatever you want to call it, between the physical side of the mixer recorder and the digital side, which has the touch screen. So I just love that particular feature. Now in this case, you're not hearing anything, so I'll turn my fader up. Okay, and actually, you know what we might do here is maybe I'll just start the recording now, and we can see about arming tracks to record once we've started the recording. Haven't tried that yet. I know I do that on my DAW all the time, so let's do that right now. We're recording track 3. Okay, now let's try to bring in tracks 1 and 2. And, okay, so it won't let us do that. So we kind of answered that question. So what I could do is stop it here. And one of the things that if you're just using this mixer recorder as I am, in that sense of wanting only the raw files, and you can see that signal seems pretty healthy there. Again, I'm trying to guess what this possibly means, but I'm basing that on the previous signal, which was my voiceover in Sound Demo 1. So what I'm going to do here is just leave that. And the other thing I want to do when we hop to the computer is look at the structure of our files, because that will tell us a little bit. Because in the case of tracks 1 and 2, we recorded that first set. Now we'll record another set and see exactly how that works in terms of the file structure. So let's go ahead and do that. I will stop talking. I'll record that, and you'll hear some of this live. Again, I have the 2 line outs of the R20 going into my mixer. So as this is recording, you're hearing the actual signal. This next patch, by the way, is very distorted and noisy, so don't assume that that's the mixer. It's the nature of this particular patch from the EOWave synthesizer voice I'm playing, and it has nothing to do with the mixer itself. So here's a little bit of that, and then we'll hop over to the computer. Okay, as we did in Sound Demo 1, let's look at the file structure here so we know what we're working with. This actually happens to be the same file, or rather same folder, and I think, let's see here, we have REC011, REC012, 21, 22, 3132. So I believe what's going on here is because we recorded each of tracks 1 and 2, which was the synthesizer voice, and track 3, which was that small line level synthesizer, the Bastel, I think what it did then, it split each of these into 2 separate files per track. The data file, by the way, doesn't contain, or the data folder rather, doesn't contain anything that we're going to be using. So again, what I'm trying to do as a musician, as a sound engineer, is to try to just take these raw files. So these are, again, wave files. And whenever I'm done with the card, I always try to eject it safely. I don't know if it's a myth or not, but maybe that will be helpful to the longevity of the card. And then what I can do here is look at my files that have been created. So I believe this one should be the signal that, yep, sure enough, that's the signal that I was worried about being a little too hot. It was our direct signal straight out of the modular gear. Let's play it. So sure enough, we're definitely peaking there. It's a little hot for me, I think, but it's probably still usable. One thing I could do with that, of course, is I could go in and do my amplification, but in reverse. So on Audacity, you could hit a negative, say 4, and then again, it's hard to tell with the sound because it is such a distorted, noisy type synthesized signal. So if I was at all concerned about peaking that resulted in distortion, and believe me, on the old multi-track recorders, that would happen a lot. And it's thus always important to make sure that your levels are good when you're recording, kind of obvious. So let's take a look at that second file, which will be the same one. But I was doing some stuff with that live. So in this case, I'm probably going to amp it up a little bit by a few dBs. I might later want to apply some correction of compression or something like isotope neutron to bring out some of the highs. But that's pretty good. So what I would do with that is save this as a WAV file. And I'll just go ahead and show you that real quick to see what is involved here. We'll just call that track 1. I'm just going to leave that at 16-bit PCM. I could do it at the original, which is 44.1 kilohertz, 24-bit. So we'll just do that and call it good. We'll do our track 2, and we'll go ahead and amp that up by 4 dBs. Export that as track 2. Okay. So that should be good. And then if I don't need these files anymore, I could just get rid of those. And I'll just put the files I want here. Let's go ahead and load up Logic. And in the meantime, I can also show you that other voice, which was the synthesized voice. That was line signal. It looks a little hot to me here. So again, that was a line signal. So it could just be, again, every, I'm going to reduce it by 4. Oops, sorry. Let's go the opposite. Every mixer is, and every recorder is unique, as we know. And so it could just be the fact of learning your mixer and getting a sense of it. So that would be pretty good if I just did that. I don't, again, hear any distortions in this signal, which is a fairly modulating but pure wave signal. And the clicks there that you're hearing are actually intentional in the sound. So just showing you my process, how I work from my Allen and Heath mixer is I will take those original files, the waves, after, again, I've either boosted them or maybe in some cases, as we've discovered, we might actually have to negative amplify them, reduce their signals a bit. I could create 2 audio tracks here in Logic, and I could just bring these in. It's going to tell me to maybe adjust the project rate. I guess it didn't in this case. Sometimes it does for me. And then I'll put this in here. And then I'll just do a hard pan left and right. Try to keep those equidistant.
And it's a little hot, the signal. So what I could also do on my attenuation module is reduce that signal a little bit. It's just one of those things when you get a new mixer or recorder, you kind of learn it a little bit to see what its strengths and weaknesses are, and you adapt to it and try to maybe make some adjustments. So again, for me, what I'm going to be using the R20 for primarily is doing multi-track recordings and bringing in those raw wave files. As I showed you in Sound Demo 1, very easy to do an export per track. Also very easy to do a mix down using the mixer section of the R20, and then mixing that down by hitting the record key as we saw with the previous example. So definitely think about, some approaches to using the mixer should you decide to get one. And as always, you have to learn a little bit and tweak things on the computer side of things if you're using a computer like I am, and also on the hardware side of things when you're doing some of your recordings in various musical sonic settings. Okay, as we close out considerations today, and just to mention, I will be doing a part 2 review of the R20, which is more going to be, say, after a month or so, where I've spent more time with the mixer multi-track recorder to get a better sense of all the features, how I use it in my workflow. And I'll do some additional audio demos, particularly when I get some of the gear that I need, the cables and adapters, to take advantage of all the channels. But I thought it'd be good to reflect on two main areas here when talking about this recorder and discussing maybe opportunities for you to consider if it's possibly right for your own audio sonic musical workspace. So as far as the applications or groups or sonic approaches or styles that this mixer recorder might be good for, definitely for small bands, as the demo online on the Zoom site suggests, this number of inputs is certainly great for mixing a small combo, a small group. If you have a lot of miking to do, like with a big choral ensemble, unless you want some hard left and right arrangements to really get in and do nuanced kind of miking and mic placement, you're going to run out of inputs here. It's also, I think, great for electronic musicians and ambient musicians. In terms of electronics, very easy to think about how we can make this work with a small setup, whether that's external gear, any kind of loopers, not using this for looping, but recording your loops plus other devices that are synced with your looper, like the RC505. I think it could be really ideal. Also for ambient musicians, I feel like this would be a great machine. Quite a while back, I saw a video from Alessandro Cortini from Nine Inch Nails and other groups talking about using an old Tascam multi-track recorder to bring in loops. And it was kind of interesting because he was using the tape speed, which one thing you can't do on something like this, which is really, say, too bad, and I miss about old 4-track recorders like a Tascam is, you could adjust the pitch, and using the actual tape and hearing kind of the warbling of it and so forth really was a cool effect. You obviously can't do anything like that. You can do stretching, as we talked about pretty briefly in this video, but it's nothing like how he was using his old Tascam to work with samples, if you will, and long ambient loops. So I think one great feature of this is because you don't have to rely on click tracks and maybe limitations of the only current 3 time signatures available on this device. If you're not worried about rhythmic kind of stuff and you just want to record live takes, this would be great for recording ambient music. Again, you have so many tracks. Easy to arm this. You set it to record. You can see the tracks as they're recording, so you really know that it's indeed working, which is a great feature. In some of my other recording devices, like my Tascam, it's really not easy to work with. There's a ton of menu diving. Even to see if the thing is recording, you kind of have to look. There is a recording light, but it's not the same in terms of this approach, which allows you to have things hands-on with arming your record buttons, using your faders, using your gain knobs, and then also seeing everything color coordinated here on the screen. So ambient musicians could also trigger in that style of using an old Tascam in the same sense. You could have a bunch of tracks recorded here. You could then use your faders to, once you hit play, to trigger those. And then because this has the ability to do both the soloing and the mute per channel, it would be very easy for you to control it that way, or to also control it through your faders in terms of, say, which of the possible
lot of tracks, actually 16 tracks that you could be playing. You would never run out of tracks. It would probably be too many tracks. So that could be like a cool opportunity for ambient musicians. Now, also in terms of podcasters and people doing voiceovers, I think this could be quite ideal because, again, you have the ability to do 4 channels of XLR. If you don't have XLR, phantom powered mics, you could always use any of the other channels to whatever you want to do with those microphones. And what could be cool about this is if you use, if you're recording multiple people, and I've done this in quite a few of my work related interviews, I would sometimes stick a lavalier mic and then I would put one on me and one on another, so I'd have a splitter. The problem I discovered is people would start touching their microphone, and you get distortions in the audio, just those artifacts, people touching things, touching their shirt or whatever. So this way you could set up an array of mics for however many people you would have on your podcast. You could have those at a good distance away from those speakers such that they're not directly touching the microphones. And as a result, you can control everything in post-production. I think one of the reasons to go with a multi-track like this over a typical stereo right recorder, and some of these do multi-track, including some of the higher end Zooms and some of the Tascam, is you have no way to control the multiple channels being all recorded into a stereo signal. You can't do it. Whereas in this case, either through line signals or through miking that could be separated out, as we'll talk about in part 2 of this review, with electroacoustic instruments, one of the things you sometimes want to do, because you might have a tin can being hit versus a frame drum being hit, you want to have separation between your microphones, maybe even in different rooms if you have that ability, such that in post-production you can control things like bleed. If you have 2 microphones close to one another, even though they might be miking different things like different drums, you always run into that issue potentially of bleed happening, and thus having separation between your mics, or of course line channels which won't bleed, it will allow you in post-production to control the exact mix once you dump this into the computer, or even do the mix down here. So I feel like for podcasters and voiceovers, it would be ideal. Instrumentalists as well, because again, you have so many channels to choose from. And if you ever run into anything where you need a higher signal and you need to tweak your gain, I found it to be the opposite. Signals are coming in too hot, but I think you have a lot of room here to move with in terms of doing your gain adjustment. Now, it's not great for looping, and as I said throughout this video, this is not a looper. They have a feature called loop, which is not really a loop. It's just basically continuing to copy a region, like one of those drummer regions. So it's not at all going to be good for a looping audience. Who knows in future firmwares that they could change that, but there isn't necessarily anything set up here now. I guess they could do something with the software, but nothing is set up with this to do looping. So if you're doing looping, you look at the RC505, which came out in the MK2 version, and use that. But I think it could be ideal to bring your looper into here along with all your other synced instruments, and then create a really nice mix down. And what's nice about that is you could have your 505 tracks on 1 and 2. You could have your other small synths on any of these tracks from 3 through 8, and then really, again, be able to separate your mix in post-production, particularly if your loops are hotter than or lower than the other synths that you're recording. And that's really why we're doing multi-track recording here. If you just want a stereo signal, I would never go with something like the R20 or any other multi-track recorder. Just get something like this or comparable and record, your lineouts from your main mixer, and you just have to realize you have no control over that in post-production. Large ensembles, as we mentioned, would be really bad for large choirs or something. So I think really small ensembles and bands this is geared for. And then live production. And by live production, I mean if you want to use this live and trigger a lot of audio channels or have a MIDI keyboard hooked up to it to play some of those 19 sounds that I've talked about extensively in this video, that's not going to be your go-to. I really don't see live production as being anywhere in the realm of what this particular instrument or device can do. Now, recording live, again, I think will be wonderful. One of the main reasons is, like a lot of other Zoom features, the form factor, as we'll talk about in the next feature here, the form factor is amazing. So just having this and your microphone set up and maybe a pair of headphones would be a dream. Having to bring a giant mixer like my Allen and Heath over here, which has its own stand and certainly which could do, as it's doing now, multi-track recording, it's not going to have the form factor that's going to allow me really convenience and being able to just set this up very quickly. One power and I'm set to go. Quickly arm all my tracks and I have a recording and I can visually see that it's recording. So again, think about this as you're maybe considering this multi-track recorder for your own uses. And with every piece of gear I own or review, I always say, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I try to give you my perspective and overview, but all of you work in so many different ways as musicians and sonic engineers. So if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's also great. It really could possibly work for a wide audience in terms of the different genres and styles of music, as I mentioned previously. But, I also realize that I'm giving you my interpretation of how things are here. So take that into account when you listen to this review and the upcoming part 2. So pros and cons, always kind of fun with a device like this. Again, this video was not sponsored, affiliated by Zoom. I paid full price for this and I'm trying to give you my objective opinion as much as possible. So I think here are the pros. The price. For $399, this is an amazing price point. I don't care what anyone says. Yes, the outside, the shell is plastic, but this is a really impressive touchscreen. I don't care what anyone says about needing an 8-inch touchscreen or whatever. This is perfect, the size. The fact that it fits in so well with the transport control, you have a very nice, easy to use, but yet condensed physical part of the mixer here going along with the multi-track recorder and that software side here that we were interacting with the touchscreen. I think it's a great value for the money. I think also the size and form factor will be amazing. Again, this will fit into a laptop bag. Imagine bringing this anywhere into the office for me to record my voiceovers for my work videos, or if I'm playing with my blues band, we could easily mic our small combo of 4 musicians. I would have no problem, say, using 4 channels for the drums, guitar, bass, and then maybe 2 channel stereo for keyboards and wind synth. So the size and form factor, I think, is amazing, again, for the price. The touchscreen in the GUI, I have to say this touchscreen is really a joy to use. Yes, there are quirks about it, as you find with every possible piece of gear that you might buy. As I've been stressing, really do think about a stylus. Anything that I use that has a touchscreen now, save my phone because it's super responsive. I always use one of these. It just saves me a lot of hassle with trying to fiddle with stuff and press it 4 or 5 times. So the touchscreen is as good as any other touchscreen I've used. Now, you may discover you don't like touchscreens and you like physicality, which, you could get a mixer, certainly, or multi-track recorder that doesn't have that touchscreen feature. Or you could use your phone, hook it into here using that optional Bluetooth adapter, and then maybe you have better response on your phone. But I love the touchscreen. I love the GUI on it, the graphic interface. I just think it works really well. And then the last pro is it's multi-track. Again, if you just want 2 stereo out line signals, then pick up one of these or pick up something that's going to very simply do what you need to do. But if you want to control the levels, the panning, the post-production effects of each of your tracks that you record, up to 16, which is crazy getting 16 tracks for this price and in this size, then how could you go wrong with something like the R20? I don't know too many other multi-track recorders out there in this price point, in this size, that will record 16 digital tracks on a touch screen that you can easily monitor as it's recording. So a lot of pros here. There are, of course, some cons, as we find with any piece of gear. The region limitations, I think personally, the fact that you're limited to 50 regions of audio or rhythm tracks is possibly very limiting. So in my personal opinion, I wouldn't purchase this particular mixer and multi-track recorder if you want to do a ton of audio production and editing inside of this particular box, because you're simply going to run out of room. Also, there are unnecessary features. To be quite honest with you, the rhythm tracks are cool, they sound great, but they're pre-recorded, they're limited by genre and BPM, beats per minute. So I don't know, for jamming or doing something very brief to work on a groove or something and maybe just lay down the groove and not worry about the actual percussion tracks, that could be really good. In fact, you could put additional drums in post-production or even, of course, record them, depending on syncing and all that kind of stuff that you could get into, including going into your DAW like Logic and analyzing transients and linking things or syncing things, if you will, if necessary, with anything rhythmic. So the other unnecessary feature, of course, is the synth. And
I really was probably too hard on the synth inside this box. What I should just say is, look, it's there. I'm never going to use it, but it's an extra feature. None of those sounds are remarkable, except I think number 19, the drum kit, which was pretty good. I'm never going to bring a MIDI file in here necessarily. I would do that on my DAW. Again, I don't see this as a replacement for your DAW. I just don't. I don't think it is the same thing as something like Logic or Ableton or Cubase or whatever you happen to be using. So the unnecessary features for me could be eliminated, but whatever, they're here so we can use them or choose to ignore them. The power is a limitation for some people, not for me. Some people really online say they want battery powered. But let's think about that logically. There's a big difference in powering something like this with a battery and something like this. If you have a touch screen that has pretty good brightness here and you can't adjust the brightness of it, how the heck would you power this with anything short of a generator? So I think it's pretty silly for people to say this should be battery powered when potentially it would just be too much power draw to be powered by a battery. But I don't know. I don't know a lot about batteries and current, so make your own decision on that. And then lastly, I would say the effects. I think the effects are limited. Again, in part 2 of this video, I will try to talk a little bit more about how to use the one insert effect and then the send effects, which I cannot seem to figure out how to use a different send effect on different channels. I thought I read something in the manual that said you could do 3 different effects, but when I really got down to it, it seemed like I could do one effect that was the same send effect on every single channel. I still haven't figured out how to send that send effect into the mix down here using the R20. In all honesty, I don't want to use the internal effects here. Nothing against them. I think some of them sound really good, and I love my Zoom G3N that I use all the time with string instruments and even wind instruments. But for something like this, I'm going to take the raw wave files, throw them into the computer. If I want to do any effects, I'll do them in post, or I'll do them here in my Eurorack gear using some of the super unique effects that I can custom tailor to my own styles and approaches and sense of what I want to produce in my music and sonic explorations. So some pros and cons here certainly to think about, and just good luck as you think about these pros and cons in pursuing whether or not to purchase the R20 by Zoom. Okay, that's going to do it today here, looking at the Zoom R20 multi-track recorder and mixer. We went through and considered a lot of the features here. For me, I think this is going to be a really great addition that's going to allow me to bridge some gaps between a lot of different equipment, some of my smaller mixers that I use for my performance settings, for my microenvironment series, as well as not having to bring in my small handheld recorder and getting a little higher quality here using this to record my XLR microphones when I'm at my office outside of my home office here. So hopefully if you get an R20, you'll think about some of these features, you'll think about some of the uses. One of the things I really love is this portability. Again, it's not battery operated, but certainly you could think about this being so convenient. It's so light, just coming in at 3 pounds, very easy to use by recording onto the SD card, and a lot of options here in terms of giving you opportunities to play with some different setups and applications as you might go about recording audio or sound engineering in your home studio or away. So thanks for listening. I'll be back with additional product overviews and feature videos in the future.